The rules for providing public comment are, each speaker must give their name and address, and you have 3 minutes. Only Longmont residents and employees of the city of Longmont may speak during first call public invited to be heard, and you must sign up on the list prior to the start of the meeting. Persons wishing to speak on a specific second reading or public hearing item are asked to add their name to the speaker list for that specific item prior to the start of the meeting. And anyone may speak and no sign-up is required at the final call public invited to be heard. We have 3 meetings that we need to approve minutes for, and I'm going to take them one at a time. We have the October 3rd meeting. May I have a motion?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Christ. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote.
Sorry, Mayor, could you do a verbal vote on this one?
Yes, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? That passes unanimously. The second meeting is December 12th, 2023. May I have a motion?
I move approval of the December 12th minutes.
Okay, that's been moved by Councilor Hidalgo-Faring, seconded by Councilor McCoy. Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. Are we ready, Crystal? Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, and that passes unanimously. The third meeting was December 19th, 2023. May I have a motion? December 19th was moved by Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilor McCoy. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Is there any discussion on that one? Seeing none, let's vote. Oh, we don't move that one twice. Do we have any agenda revisions? Well, wait a minute, this is actually to see if this agenda is being and it comes from the city clerk. It looks like
Mayor, I don't have any revisions.
okay, great. Now, do we have any motions to direct the city manager to add agenda items? Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. The City Council vision is updated and affirmed last spring for 2023 and 24, identified early child care and education as one of its primary priorities. We're also committed to strong places and amenities and improving the transportation infrastructure. It was recently brought to my attention that daycare facilities and also pet boarding and kennel facilities are either conditional uses with restriction or not an allowed use at all in our employment zone definitions, which are N-PE, non-residential primary employment, and also M-U-E, mixed-use employment. I think many parents and pet owners will acknowledge that they're more comfortable when their young children and their pets that can't be left at home are close to where they work rather than a long distance away in a friendlier zone. And additionally, rents are likelier to be lower in those districts, which means it would lower the cost of daycare services in particular, although also doggy daycare. Parents can visit their children more easily at lunchtime, and with fewer shorter car trips, reducing traffic. So there are all sorts of good reasons to do this. And for these reasons, I move to direct staff to review the matrices of allowed use for zone types NPE and MUE to assess the feasibility of expanding these allowed uses in the 2 employment zones and bring to council an ordinance amending the matrices to expand the allowed use as much as is possible and safe.
Councilor Martin, before we get a second, can you take that down to like a one-sentence motion to with
Sure,
the code and
yeah, all we need is the last the last sentence.
Right.
Right? I move to direct staff to review the matrices of allowed use for zones N-PE and MU-E, assess the feasibility of expanding the allowed uses to include early childcare and pet care kennels, and bring to council an ordinance amending the matrices of allowed use as expanding them as much as possible.
That is a sentence.
Yeah, that's a long sentence, but thank
I'll
you.
second.
Thank you.
Did you get that, Crystal? Yes.
I have a copy I'll bring you.
I'm not going to try to repeat that. So that has been moved by Counselor Martin, seconded by Counselor Hidalgo Faring. Is there any discussion? I have a comment. I agree with you on the childcare, absolutely. My problem, and I guess within this motion, we have to consider the allergies of pets with other children and in daycare, allergies to some of these pets, unless I totally misunderstood. Did you want the,
Yeah, I think you did. I'm not proposing that the pet care and the daycare be in the same business.
Okay,
It's
that's what
just-
thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're both allowed uses that are really too hard to come by in those zones, and
Okay.
it's the best place for them.
okay. Is there any other, Counselor Christ?
Counselor Martin, do you have a business that's interested in this, or that has someone that has contacted you with more information about?
Yes, there is one business that is interested in a kennel zone, and kennels are not an allowed use at all, which is one of the reasons why we have a lot of those around the periphery of Longmont. You have to drive a long way to get there, and then, again, it's part of the council policy to encourage accessibility of daycare. And once again, it's conditional use with provisions in both of those zones. And I talked to several of the senior planners, and nobody could figure out why it needed to be conditional use.
Might it be helpful for staff to have connection with that individual so that they could?
They're in touch.
Okay. All right, very good.
And so, yeah, the reason that I found out about this, in fact, was because they had been told it was going to take a really long time. And when I got involved, it turned out that maybe we could do it a lot faster than that by amending the tables of use rather than rezoning a building, which is a long process.
Okay, I look forward to more information.
Yeah, and it's pro-business.
It is.
So this is direction to staff to research it, bring it back with their resolution.
Yes.
Okay, I see no more comments. Let's vote. All those, are you ready? Okay. Whoops, it disappeared. But it looks like it was unanimous. So that passes unanimously. Thank you. Are there any other issues that you want to bring forth on a future agenda? Seeing nothing, we'll move on to the city manager report.
No report, Mayor, Council.
Okay, we do have a special report, a presentation. It's actually a proclamation. This proclamation is a proclamation designating January 15th through the 21st, 2024 as honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Week in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas January 15th, 2024 marks the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, on which we honor Dr. King's unwavering fight for the absence of oppression and the presence of opportunity for all, who sacrificed to sow the seeds for a movement of peace, equality, and justice. And whereas across the nation, in the state of Colorado and the city of Longmont, honoring Dr. King has become a week of service within our communities. Events held throughout Boulder County are made possible by the commitment and dedication of many volunteers from diverse backgrounds. The combined efforts of these volunteers are a fulfillment of Dr. King's dream and highlight the importance of the civil rights movement and the need to take action. And whereas Ms. Carrie Adams, program coordinator for the Silver Creek Leadership Academy, Silver Creek High School, Longmont, Colorado, has given many years of steadfast support for the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. programming throughout Boulder County and has committed her life to developing 21st century leaders who can live out the value of Dr. King's dream. Now therefore, I, Joan Peck, Mayor, by virtue of the authority vested in me, and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim the week of January 15th through the 21st, 2024, as honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Week in Longmont, and invite all to attend this exciting program honoring Dr. King. So I would like to call Glenda Robinson, Carrie Adams, and Eric Finstead to accept the proclamation and say a few words.
I don't think Eric's here.
Okay, we'll take you two. Yes, Madeline, would you mind turning on the mic? Or Glenda?
Thank you, thank you. Obviously, I'm not Carrie and I'm not Eric,
No, you're not.
but I'm honored to be here. Glenda?
So thank you all so much for allowing us to designate this week as the week for honoring and celebrating Dr. King's life and legacy. Some of you might know and remember that I was with Dr. King on his last deed on earth, which was March 28th, 1968, in the I Am a Man March. Many of you have seen that. That sign. And so we thought we were going to kill the dreamer, but I think his dream is bigger than ever before. And all of us, all of humanity, literally, are benefiting from him giving his life for the cause of the freedoms that we do enjoy. You want me to keep going? So on Monday, well, let me say this. On Sunday, January 14th, we will be at the Jewish Community Center in Boulder celebrating the life and legacy of Dr. King, and then we bring it to Longmont on Monday. We have an exciting program lined up. We have the legendary, I don't know, some of you may have heard of him, Mr. Purnell Steen. He's now Dr. Purnell Steen. He just got conferred an honorary doctorate. But he, too, was with Dr. King on August 28, 1963, for the actual I Have a Dream March. And then he had a chance to celebrate and play. He's a musician, so he will be our musical guest. So he played for the 4 little black girls that were murdered in September of 1963. And then he's just a legend. He's been in a lot of places and done a lot of things, and he's from Denver. So he's bringing, our musical guest will be Dr. Purnell Steen and the 5 Points Ambassadors. So we're excited about that. And then you all heard last year Dr. Raylan Rabaka, who is the founder and chair of the Cause Center, the Center for African and African American Studies on CU's campus. Dr. Rabaka is pretty phenomenal in his own right. And so our theme is, let's see, I should know this. I named it. Fanning the Flames of the Dream, Bringing the Generations Together. And so Mr. Steen is 82. I'm not sure how old Dr. Rabaka is, probably 40-something. Then there's me, who's been around forever.
We won't talk about that.
Anyhow, it's our hope that we're able to bring the generations together. And the final thing is that we will be celebrating Brenda Ingram Lyle. Brenda lives in Longmont. She founded the Family Learning Center in Boulder. Started hoping to be a stay-at-home mom, and having she and her neighbor agreed to take in 10 kids.
Oh, my goodness.
And on the first day, 43 years ago, when they opened, there were 43 children and parents lined up around the door. So anyhow, I could go on and on. I better stop. But on behalf of Carrie Adams, who has really, at Silver Creek, you cannot beat she and Eric Finnestead and the work that they do, and the Silver Creek Leadership Academy kids, and just the entire platform or venue that they offer for us each year to have this exciting program. And so I don't think you'll be disappointed. We'll do our best.
We'll be looking for you. We'll be looking for you for sure. And then we got the Freedom Fund coming up on February 18th at the Mackey Auditorium, where our guest speaker is going to be the phenomenal, very, 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 I don't have words that can describe this man who served 30 years he was Anthony Race Hinton, served 30 years, and he was freed by Brian Stevenson and the initiative, the project initiative that freed him, is our special guest on March 18th. Mackey Auditorium. I'm sorry, February. I keep saying March. February 18th at 3:00 p.m. Mackey Auditorium. Please be there. Please go online to the and register yourselves. It's free. It's open to the public. This is our way of giving back to the community, to our community, and we want you to be there. You will not be disappointed. I promise you. I promise you. Thank you so much. This is
Thank you.
amazing. Thank you.
Would you like a picture with us?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I probably should have taken off my mask for that picture, but I'm getting laryngitis, as you can tell, probably. I didn't want to stand that close to people without my mask. But thank you, Lance. So now we're at first call public invited to be heard. Remember that you have 3 minutes, and we would like your name and address, please. The first person on the list is Sarah Sharp. I know you, Sarah.
Good evening, Sarah Sharp, 161 Hinson Drive, Longmont. First, I'd like to thank Harold and city staff for the workable hearing device so that I could be present today. It surely is appreciated. I'm here as a member of the Early Childhood Alliance, and it's interesting because I think we just heard that so many years ago there were a lineup outside the door for children's services. There still is. The Alliance seeks to have a dedicated funding source for child care and children's services. And as many of you know, 40% of the children in the service area that we're proposing are the only ones that have access to childcare and licensed childcare. And so anything that happens to increase the childcare in Longmont and the surrounding area is greatly appreciated. And also, I'll just remind everybody that only 40% of our children are arriving at school, at kindergarten, ready to learn. And so we have a continuing problem there. And apparently the pandemic has made the situation even worse, as we have a large number of small children who are having severe mental health issues. And so we all need to be aware of that. Research shows that the high-quality childcare can help mitigate the situation. And so Longmont is known for supporting childcare, and we really appreciate it. I'm also here as a member of Launch for affordable, attainable housing. And if you want prime workers and young people to be able to live where they work, in addition to affordable, attainable housing, you have to have affordable, attainable childcare. So anything you can do to continue to support is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. A Jordan person?
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Jordan Person, and I have been a constituent of Longmont's Ward 1, 640 Buchanan Lane, for the past 3 years, and a Colorado resident since 2010. Since moving to this state, I have maintained my license statuses as both a nurse and a massage therapist for now 23 years as a nurse and 18 years as a massage therapist. This year, the mobile spa service that I own celebrates 10 years in business. I am here tonight to discuss the opportunity of expanding that business to a brick and mortar location somewhere here in Longmont. As of this week, on January 8th, the Code of Colorado Regulations, specifically 6-926, has been updated to allow spa businesses to apply for a marijuana hospitality license. More than a decade after cannabis massage oils and skincare products have been legalized, Colorado no longer lumps the topical use of cannabis with the smokable, vapable, or other types of consumable products. Unlike most marijuana hospitality applicants, I am not seeking the ability to consume cannabis inside other than by the use of topicals. There will be no smoking or no vaporizing products at my intended brick and mortar location. There are spas all over the world, none of which allow smoking of any kind in their treatment facilities, and mine would follow that same protocol. It is my goal to open a non-smoking topical cannabis spa here in Longmont that will provide infused treatments such as cannabis massage, infused facials, organic manicures and pedicures, and more. As we have done for the last 10 years, we will be exclusively working with massage therapists, estheticians, and other licensed professionals in order to comply with all regulations and requirements set forth by the state of Colorado. In the last 10 years of being in business, I have seen firsthand the quality of life improvement that cannabis skincare products offers, and I want to share that quality of life with the city and community of Longmont. As the city of Longmont has not previously addressed a business such as this, one that normalizes a plant while avoiding odor and smoking nuisances commonly associated, I stand before you today to ask, is this a business model that the city of Longmont would like to see or entertain? And will you be entertaining the licensing specifically for the updated hospitality laws? I have provided you the updated 6-926, and my contact information is at the bottom. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for the law. Giving it to us. Jordan. Thank you, Jordan. Megan Ciaros?
Hello. I guess I have 3 minutes. I was going to kind of speak a little more on homelessness, but I do have some comments that I want to make. I think it's great that that you're trying to expand childcare. I know that the Smuckers plant actually has childcare built in, and I think that expanding that to include educational childcare is a great idea, especially since we've gone through such women's suffrage and it's so difficult. But in addition to that, maybe getting to the point where, until they're 2, we're able to stay with their own children. 5, like sometimes, but until they're 2, they aren't actually considered separate people. They think that they're the same person. So it's really difficult for them to go into this environment where they are, where they're being in babysitting. So I understand the mental health issues, but I think offering, statistically, if you offer supports to the families, those mental health issues go down, especially, a lot of people say it's just monetary, but you also need the supports in the home because they're working 40 hours a week or they're working 20 hours a week or they're supporting their other family members. So you're going to need things like, adding house care to that, or you're going to need decompression time. And I think I commented last time on the revolution. I personally don't have an addiction, but I know a lot of people do. That addiction time should be considered decompression time, so that we need to reframe that so that they can eventually let that fall away, because it's being considered in the negative and we need to consider it in the positive, which goes back to that childcare time and having somebody watch them during that childcare, during that decompression time, because at this point it's a body need and they're being considered criminals for it. So I think that if we're kind of, and it directly relates to the housing need, it relates to the childcare need, it relates to the homelessness issues, it relates to the whole circle of things. So we have to reframe that and be able to decriminalize it. We have to be able to accept that mothers need that time for decompression, whether that's watching TV or cleaning house or whatever that might be. Even building that time into your day, if you assume that you're thinking of TANF, that you'd want to build time for the mothers to clean their house. Because if you're trying to give somebody 40 hours a week, they have to commute 2 hours a week. You don't know whether there's bus time, what kind of time that looks like. They have to pick their kids up. There's no hours in the day. And then they have to work double the time. So there's so many issues that are associated with this. Then that's why half of the mothers turn back to drugs. I'm so fortunate that I don't have an addiction. My family didn't raise me that way, but I do know the struggles that are involved with it. And so I think that it's a complicated issue that we have to address holistically. So I think that I'm going to leave it at that because I don't need to address the homelessness as much right now, but that's on point. So I appreciate your listening.
Thank you, Megan. Did you give us your address?
Oh, it is 500 Kimbark.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Brian Johnston.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I haven't been here in a while, so I want to congratulate those re-elected and those newly elected to the council, all deserving so. I'm here tonight because, first I reside at 926 Kaufman, which resides in between the loading dock and the corporate headquarters of Longmont Dairy. It's one little house in between the two. It's caused a lot of ongoing issues because they have 30 drivers that come twice a day to load and unload. They're loud, they're really inconsiderate. They've done things like this happens 6 nights a week and often where they'll block my driveway, walk off, leave the truck running, and I'm not able to exit my house. 4 o'clock in the morning, they'll park in front of the house, prop the milk truck doors open, blasting music. It's been an ongoing issue for 8 years. I've never brought it to council's attention. I have worked with code enforcement about it. We've even been to court over it recently. Then finally, in the last month, things have been better. The yelling for no reason at 3 o'clock in the morning, the blocking my driveway has stopped. Then today, late this afternoon, 3 signs appeared in my front yard that said Longmont Dairy Parking Only. And these are the nice metal, looks like they're going to be made permanent. And that's odd to me, especially because in front of Longmont Dairy's business, there's 10 or 12 spots, no signs being put. Across the street, there's 10 or 12 spots. That's where like Family Dollar is, that shopping center. No signs. But just in front of the 3 spots directly in front of my house, 3 Longmont Dairy only, parking only signs. I don't know if this is just misplaced, maybe, but if this is how it's going to be, it's going to cause problems. The problem's been ongoing. If you don't believe me, I have a letter from Red Line Athletics stating the same thing, how they obstruct views where you can't pull in and out of your driveway. They pull up right on your driveway, leave the headlights on. Those big milk trucks right in front of your driveway. So every time you back in and out, it's really dangerous. And to grant them the 3 parking spots in front of my house that they and only they can use seems odd to me, especially when there's 20 plus spots right there with no restrictions that they can use at any time. It's almost like I'm being targeted, is what it feels like. And again, it's been ugly between them and I. There have been shouting, cussing matches. Police have been there multiple times because these men, 3 o'clock in the morning, screaming nonstop, running heavy machinery at 11 o'clock at night, things they're not supposed to be doing. The code enforcement doesn't make them stop. They'll call them, be like, you shouldn't be doing this. 3 days later, they're right back to it. Can we please address these 3 no parking signs and move them to somewhere, to one of the 20 other spots on the block instead of directly in front of my house so I don't have to endanger my life every time I back in and out of my driveway? It seems really irrational to do this just in front of my home and only my home. And I don't understand the logic behind it. So any help with getting this corrected so we don't have further problems would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you all for your time.
Shaquille Dalal.
Shaquille Dalal, 219 Francis Street. Mayor and members of council, I'm here tonight speaking in favor of expanded opportunities for child care providers in Longmont. As you know, enrollment in Longmont schools has begun to decline and the city of Longmont is getting older. We now have a median age of 41.3, which is 10% higher than neighboring communities like Firestone and Berthoud and Loveland and many other neighboring communities. This is happening because Longmont is rapidly becoming the kind of community where young families cannot afford to live. We squeeze them on the cost of housing and we squeeze them on the cost of childcare. After the cost of housing, childcare is one of the most significant costs faced by young families. While the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services considers 7% of gross income to be the affordable threshold for childcare, the Colorado Health Institute reports that the typical Longmont family is spending 27% of their income on childcare. We need more childcare providers in the city, and those childcare providers need options for locations across the city in order to prevent us from becoming a gated community filled with the old and the wealthy. While the problem is huge and can often feel insurmountable, we can make progress on housing costs and childcare through incremental change. One small change we can make is to provide more options for the kinds of locations available for childcare providers to set up. By creating additional options, perhaps more affordable locations will become available, which will help reduce the cost of childcare. Some of these locations might also be near employers, providing a significant benefit for families and reducing traffic by allowing childcare options near where parents work. I want to thank City Council for taking up this issue and to thank the city staff for what they're doing to make this possible and hope that we find ways to grant greater flexibility for childcare providers in terms of their locations in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaquille. Lance Whitaker.
A balloon ascension day, and being a balloon pilot, I'll have you know that the rule number 1 is that takeoffs are optional, but landings are mandatory. So as you ascend in your balloon, make sure you're gonna land. I've been petitioning for House Bill 191230 for almost a year now, and glad to see it on the agenda today as an update to marijuana and liquor. Hope to see you soon. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you, Lance. Stanley Toll.
The name is Stan Toll, 2001 Terry Street. And thank Council for letting me speak. What I was going to mention is that the city should really look into the use of reusable bags in grocery and food areas, and also the jet dryers. The reason I am concerned about this is that when I went to college, I was an ag major and I studied how to use pathogens to control insect pests and how to produce virulence and stuff like that. And the problem with reusable bags in the grocery store is it produces this cycle where stuff goes to the grocery store, comes to a kitchen, and then you have food items like meat and stuff. And the kitchen is actually the most diseased part of any household, and some households are worse than others. Then it goes back to the grocery store, and then it produces a cycle that, from my study in college, it produces what they call a pathway to increased virulence. This is what has been proposed, what actually caused COVID to be a pandemic, was during the wet market, a similar type situation was taking place. I also am concerned about the jet dryers that we are allowing all our fast food and grocery stores and gyms to use. And one of the things that I'm going to try to get a couple of articles to you, there's been in the last 4 years, there's been this huge increase in gastrointestinal diseases. And I've been aware of this because being in foreign areas, I actually suffered intestinal damage from this, and it's hurting me presently. And this sort of stuff, jet dryers, so many people take it, they basically wet their hands, and then they put them under this dryer, and that is what we use to spread insecticides to control insects. And studies have shown that that's a real danger. And this increase in the gastrointestinal and other diseases that we're seeing, up to 60% in the last 4 years, follows
Thank you, Stan.
these developments. Thank you.
You're welcome. Strider?
Thank you. Strider Benston, 951 17th. I'd like to acknowledge and honor, we lost two of our best people in the last couple of days. Dan Benavides, who was one of the founders of El Comité and gave us at least 40 years of really dedicated service to all the people of Longmont. And Mary Blue, just today, I think she died. And she was a long-term member of the city council and one of the best listeners and responders that we've, had. And just wonderful people. And Longmont, we miss them greatly. I didn't know Glenda and Marilyn, Madeline, we're going to be here. She mentioned 21st century leadership. The people of Selma, Alabama gave me this shirt. I just happened to find it last night and happened to be wearing it today. And I didn't know, but the first time I came back after the Battle of Selma was 1990. It wasn't safe for me to go back to Alabama during that 25 years. And so I happen to be wearing the T-shirt tonight. And next Monday, Martin Luther King, my guide, my colleague, and my friend, is his 95th birthday on his holiday. So isn't that nice to have a birthday on your own holiday? We are still trying to live up to the life he showed us and to the message he gave us. And we are in severe straits right now. I need to speak. Who is the person who tried to kill me 6 weeks ago on the road? I'm a 79-year-old man. I haven't been able to speak hardly anywhere except here, so why would they bother? But it was a very dedicated effort to try to kill me. We had 5 eyewitnesses, but the person who is threatening our country is not worshiping Jefferson Davis. He's worshiping Adolf Hitler. We need to wake up and save our democracy.
Thank you. Thank you, Strider. Seeing no one on the list, I'm going to close first call public invited to be heard. We are now at the consent agenda. Do we need a bio break? Seeing none, Harold? Okay, we are now at the consent agenda. Can I ask Crystal to read the consent agenda into the record?
Yes, Mayor. Second reading and public hearing for the ordinance introduced on the consent agenda will be held on January 23rd, 2024. Item 9A is ordinance 2024-05, a bill for an ordinance repealing and reenacting Chapter 2.56 of the Longmont Municipal Code on the Historic Preservation Commission and amending Chapter 2.97, Section 2.97.101.b. Item 9B is ordinance 2024-06, a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 15.02, Section 15.02.060.I of the Longmont Municipal Code on review of variance requests, rental agreement for collaborative transportation planning between the cities of Brighton, Dacono, Thornton, the towns of Erie, Frederick, Firestone, Lochbuie, Meade, Weld County, and the city of Longmont. Item 9F is Resolution 2024-04, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the city to apply for the 2024 through 2026 Peace Officer Mental Health Program grant from the Colorado Department of Local Affairs to provide counseling services for employees of the Longmont Department of Public Safety. Item 9G is Resolution 2024-05, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the special counsel contract between the city and Wilson Williams Fellman Dittman LLP for special counsel services. Item 9H is Resolution 2024-06, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving a land dedication as satisfaction of the city's inclusionary housing requirements for a residential development at 1313 Spruce Avenue. Item 9I is designate the city's website as the official posting location for city council meeting notices for the 2024 meetings.
Thank you very much. Are there any items that councilors would like to pull from this consent agenda? Councilor Christ.
I'd like to pull 9A and 9H.
No, that's great. But would you mind moving the consent agenda minus 9A and 9?
I move that the consent agenda be moved minus 9A and minus 9H.
That was made by Councilor Chris, seconded by Councilor Martin. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. Employment. Do we have a staff? We do. We have planner Jennifer Hewitt-Apperson.
Good evening.
This is presentation.
Hi, good evening, members of the council. Please let me know if you can't hear me speaking clearly through my mask. I prefer to keep it on for a variety of reasons this evening. So yes, we're here to discuss, this is a public hearing for proposed annexation of 11386 East Rogers Road. In terms of its location, so this request is for approximately 9¼ acres on the south side of East Rogers Road between Lashley and Alpine Sugar Mill, so this particular parcel right there. So this property is part of a larger county enclave, and it does meet the contiguity requirements established by Colorado revised statutes. Additionally, this area is designated as mixed-use employment in the Envision Longmont Comprehensive Plan, and the applicant is seeking the appropriate mixed-use employment zoning district. One thing to note is that this property is immediately north of the sugar factory planning area. It's currently used for outside storage that includes boats and RVs and such. This council referred this annexation for formal application back in October of 2022, and so it has been going through the development review process since then, and we're here tonight to bring this to you for consideration. So as I mentioned, this is adjacent to the sugar factory and steam planning area. Just for context, the red star is the subject property. The sugar factory planning area is immediately to the south. So the sugar factory plan, as you're well aware, we've discussed in the past, really emphasizes a mix of urban scale uses. So while this property is not directly in that planning area, it will, under the current proposal, be complementary in terms of use and scale as part of this larger part of Longmont. So just as a quick overview, the proposed use of this property is multifamily development, which is a permissible secondary use within the mixed-use employment zoning district and Envision Longmont category. This land use category does promote diversification of older employment areas, including incorporation of high-density residential uses. The proposed development is permitted within this category and would meet the minimum density requirements of 18 units per acre in this district. Additionally, this particular annexation is consistent with Envision Longmont, particularly the goals and policies relating to compact, efficient, and infill development, a sustainable mix of uses, as well as focusing infill and redevelopment in identified areas of change. So at this stage in the process, the concept plan is quite broad, particularly because there is only one use proposed. The applicant will speak in a little bit more detail about what their development concept will entail ultimately. Future development of this property upon annexation would be subject to the requirements of the Longmont Land Development Code, and any deviations from the adopted concept plan as approved through the annexation would require a concept plan amendment. So going through all of our various processes here. So the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval of this annexation, subject to a condition that staff further investigate some environmental assessments, which we did. So the condition of the Planning and Zoning Commission approval has been satisfied. So we are not requesting, staff is not recommending any conditions of that sort with our recommendation to council tonight. So in a nutshell, there were some questions related to an environmental site assessment on the property. We did some further investigation and concluded that the applicant's environmental site assessment was in fact correct, that there were no recognized environmental conditions on the site. So basically the conditions of that recommendation have been satisfied, and staff is, we are asking that this council approve this annexation as proposed. And with that, keeping it brief for you this evening, this is fairly straightforward. I'm going to turn it over to the applicant for their presentation this evening.
Does that work? There we go. All right. Good evening, Council, Mayor and Council members. My name is Ryan McBreen with Norris Design, 244 North College Avenue, Fort Collins, Colorado. We are grateful to be here tonight, excited to be in front of you this evening. Jennifer and the rest of the staff did a great job walking us through this process over the last year plus on this, so we're excited, like I said, to be here to kind of this next step so that we can hopefully get your approval this evening and move forward so we can begin the site planning process. I'm going to be brief. She did a great job kind of covering the major details, but we just want to get into a little more color going on with the project. First and foremost, the developer of this project is Kairoy. They have a great reputation and a lot of great projects along the Colorado Front Range. Tyler Sibley is here this evening tonight, and he's available to answer any questions we might have, or you might have, after we finish here. We're familiar with the site location and won't go any further on that. Just a little more color on what's going on in the area here. As you can see, we're right on the edge of development, city limits of the town, of the city. So it just makes sense to annex into the city and become part of the city of Longmont. Current zoning, the property, as mentioned, it is a storage yard for RVs, cars, and the like. Sometimes not necessarily thought of as an attractive use, but with everything going on in the area, it makes sense for this to kind of change use, right? We're not part of the sugar mill or steam, but we're in an adjacent area, which we're going to take advantage of the momentum in that area and be part of the momentum to help that area redevelop and grow and prosper and become a great part of Longmont. A few more pictures of kind of the current condition out there, what's going on in the area. As noted, we are in conformance with the mixed-use employment designation as part of the Envision Longmont Master Plan. We want to follow those standards and applicable requirements, including setbacks, density, all that good stuff. We don't anticipate asking for any variances or deviations from what the City of Longmont standards would be underneath that zoning. This was shared with you, but multifamily development, access off of Rogers Road, several buildings, parking, basically meeting all of the city standards for all of those requirements, including height, density, parking requirements, open space, and the like. A few benefits, as mentioned before, further be a catalyst for the redevelopment of this area that's happening right now. We're excited to be part of that. Adding to the housing options for the area. As we all know, there's a shortage of housing opportunities, not just in Longmont, but in the whole area. This is just going to further bolster the availability of housing. Increased revenues for the cities. As you know, we're not part of the city now. Once we become part of the city, we'll be paying more taxes, development fees, and the like will help that. And then high-quality development. As I mentioned, Kairoy has a great name for building high-quality developments that communities are proud of and people want to live in. Just an example of the type of project we think in community we want to add to the city of Longmont. Here's an example project, community center, with great living spaces that people use and congregate and become part of their community and neighborhood. Indoor spaces, outdoor spaces, resort-style amenity pools, and the like. We're really excited to go to the next phase. We ask for your support this evening. As noted by Jennifer, we are in conformance with all the review criteria, as well as the applicable land use and planning documents. So once again, we ask for your support this evening, and we're here to answer any and all questions you might have about our application. And we're excited to move to the next step, so thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. This was a great presentation from both of you. Councilor Martin.
Yes, thank you. How are you planning to satisfy the affordable housing ordinance requirement?
Ryan got all the height of this partnership. So, good evening. Thanks so much for the question. As we know, there's a couple different options associated with affordable housing. We're still very early in our process, right? I mean, we've been at this for a long time, just working with Jennifer and the city team on all the different nuances associated with this annexation and zoning process. So we understand the various options that are at our disposal, and look forward to working through that as we get into the site plan process, as we get deeper into the design efforts.
Thank you for that explanation. Are there any other questions from council? Seeing none, I'm going to open up the public hearing, and I do see one person, excuse me, signed up. Megan Sakara? Okay. No, but thanks anyway. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to address this? Seeing no one, I am going to close the public hearing and, excuse me, ask for a motion from council.
I move ordinance 2024-01.
That's been moved by Counselor Hidalgo Faring, seconded by Counselor Yarbrough. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. The second one on our list is 2024-02, a bill for an ordinance authorizing a farmland lease agreement between the City of Longmont and David Asbury, the tenant, on the Montgomery Farm premises. Are there any questions from council on this ordinance? No. Seeing none, I will open the public hearing for ordinance 2024-02. Is there anyone in the public that would like to address this ordinance? Seeing none, I would like to ask for a vote. I mean a motion.
Second.
Moved by Counselor McCoy, seconded by Counselor Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote. And that carries unanimously. The third one is 2024-03, a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 14, Section 14.08, related to sewers. Are there any questions from council? Seeing none, I now open the public hearing on 2024-03. Is there anyone in the public that would like to address sewers? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and ask for a motion. Okay, moved by Counselor McCoy, seconded by Counselor Martin. Let's vote. That carries unanimously. Number 4 is 2024-04, a bill for an ordinance authorizing the City of Longmont to lease the real property known as Vance Brand Municipal Airport Hangar Parcel H-44C, the premises, to VBMA Hangar 44C, LLC, the tenant. Are there any questions from council on this ordinance? Seeing none, I will now open the public hearing on 2024-04. Is there anybody from the public like to address this ordinance? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and ask for a motion.
I'll move ordinance 2024-04.
Second.
That was made by Counselor Hidalgo Faring, seconded by Counselor Christ. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. Oh, we don't know yet. So it does pass unanimously. There you go. Thank you. We are now on the agenda at the items removed from the consent agenda, and they were removed by Counselor Christ, items 9A and 9H. Counselor Christ, do you want to address 9A?
Sections. The first one is requiring designation procedures for historic districts. And the second section, a review of permits before demolition. Both of those, I believe, are good additions to the existing municipal code. But I'm concerned about the last three. For one, the maintenance requirements, because something about owning a house, when maintenance needs to happen, often it's sudden and expensive. And so I'm wondering if there's any way to work compassionately, especially if people buy a house that needs work, which we're talking about structures that are over 50 years old. Often they buy them cheaper because they need work, and that makes them more attainable. And also there's less competition for them. So I feel like the maintenance requirement may adversely affect those who are maybe in the more attainable housing category. And would you like me to just go through all three? Okay. So then the section 2.56.230 enforcement and penalties. This is mostly penalties for somebody who has allowed the property to degrade to where it needs it to be demolished. And I feel like if somebody's going to wait that long, a year's wait for another permit may not be that much of a penalty. I also am concerned when I talk about the maintenance that people who want to maintain their property may be impacted by this and be under a moratorium and not be able to do the maintenance when they have the funds available. Okay, now in the last section, decision-making capacities, I'm also concerned about giving authority to the HPC that really belongs to the P&Z Commission. There's some advantage to keeping those separate. So I just want to hear staff's response to those.
Mayor Peck, Councilmember Chris, Don Burchett, Planning Manager, filling in tonight for Glenn Van Nemogen, who's not in town right now. Jennifer Hewitt-Apperson's here as well. She's the liaison to the Historic Preservation Commission. She probably has a better understanding of the proposals that are in the CouncilCom than I do. I'll have some background and history that I could share with you of where I think a lot of these have come from. Jennifer's probably the better one to try to give you a little bit more info as to why these changes are specifically being made, at least the three that you spoke of. So if it is the pleasure of the council, I'd ask if we could let Jennifer maybe just walk you through those three proposed changes, and then you can ask questions. And if there's something that we can't provide tonight, obviously, we can take note of that and work with Glenn so that during his presentation, he could address those items on second reading.
Okay, thanks, Don.
You're welcome.
Good evening, members of the council, Councilwoman Christ. So in terms of the maintenance requirements, that really gets to a concept known as demolition by neglect. It has less to do with a property owner who can't necessarily afford to maintain their property and more to do with someone who is deliberately not maintaining the property so that they can essentially demolish it. Basically letting it get to a code enforcement situation where it would become unsafe. It's more of a deliberate lack of maintenance as opposed to happenstance where someone just isn't able to keep up with it. So that's really what it has to do with. In terms of the moratorium of building permits, this is something that we really have talked through quite a bit as well, and we'll take it to. I'll talk with Glenn about this so he can address it at the public hearing. But effectively, it's how do we add some more carrots and sticks for people who aren't following the rules? Basically, if someone's deliberately making changes to their property without going through the right processes. But again, I'll let Glenn talk a little bit more about that at the next meeting, but that's definitely something we've really been working through as well. In terms of the last section regarding decision-making capacities, that is really less about HPC and PZ sharing duties as it was making sure that we have consistent processes. For example, how do we handle things, basically making sure that there's similar language about quasi-judicial nature of decisions and such. So it really was to ensure that there was some consistency between those two processes or between those two decision-making bodies, moving forward to prevent any issues. So with that, Eugene, is there anything that I'm missing on this? Okay.
Well, thank you. Let me ask you, is there any way the maintenance requirements, well, I guess what I want to ask is there a way to keep an eye on a property before it gets to the arena of being, needing to be raised to the ground? And I'm thinking, doesn't that come under code enforcement where, you're kind of keeping an eye on a property and making sure that people, are keeping their property up to code? So is this really needed? Because there's just so many scenarios that came to my mind, and in thinking about it, I thought there was not something you could write that would encompass all of those scenarios. And so I just feel like this is going to be an arena where we're going to have a lot of pushback from the public. I mean, people want to have the liberty to deal with their property as their finances allow, as their,
So this particular section, if I may, it really has more to do with historic landmarks. It's not really any property in the city. It's if it's
Right.
if it's already a designated landmark. So
Right.
presumably, if someone owns or purchases a landmark, there's the expectation that it would be maintained and in a way that is consistent with the historic preservation requirements and consistent with the code. This is really intended to prevent, I've seen situations in other places where I've worked where it's a property has historic value, but the person wants to do something else with the property, and rather than meet the requirements as they exist, they decide to just let it rot into the ground so that it has to be demolished because it's a safety hazard. It's really intended to prevent bad actors. That's really what this has to do more with, is preventing bad actors than it is than it has to do with affecting homeowners who are trying to maintain their properties and such. But it's really specific to landmark properties.
Right, but this ordinance is asking for designation for historic districts so that it can include other structures that are 50 years old and consider them for maybe some historic significance, but also a review of any demolition for something 50 years or older.
Gotcha. So I was referring strictly to the the section 2.56220.
Yeah.
In terms of the demolition, that is really some clarification because currently we do have provisions in the code for review of proposed demolitions to properties that could be eligible. This is 2.56180. It's really more for making sure that we don't lose potential historic assets in the community, and really it adds more specificity to the demolition review requirements that are already there in the code. So it really adds more specificity.
And as I said, I agree with that portion of it. But I don't understand because this other section for maintenance actually relates to the same section, 2.56.220. So I think it's an addition to this new historic district. And by the way, I like the change in requiring 51% of the homeowners to agree. I think that's a step in a really good direction.
Right, and so we currently do not have any locally designated historic districts in the city. Right. So at this point, this really only has to deal with historic landmarks, which are individual properties. So outside of a historic district, we're really only talking about our designated landmarks that people have either proactively designated on their own or they purchased knowing it was a landmark. So the whole district question at this point is really very hypothetical, but it's really setting the stage if we ever had that happen.
Right. Okay. So I guess the question I have is, does this all relate to the same section? Which it does seem to, 2.56, 220, 230. I think it all relates to this new demolition ordinance. So.
I mean, it all relates in terms of it being historic preservation. The demolition section, it really has to do with a review more than anything, so, of proposed demolitions. So slightly different, related but similar.
Okay. Well, I'm in agreement in the two first sections, but not in agreement on the last three sections. Is there a way we can bifurcate this into two different pieces to be voted? Do we have to vote tonight? We do. To go on the first reading.
Let's see if some of the other councilors.
Yeah, please weigh in.
Councilor
Thank you, Mayor Pick. Jennifer and Don, just so the public understands, the city's not initiating any sort of blanket historic districts.
No.
People are coming in as either groups or individuals and placing their, having that placed on an individual home, or in the case of like East Side, proposing something like that. That group that's doing that wants to make that their area a blanketed area, and to the point here that it has to have a certain percentage of the population in that area supporting it. That seems pretty logical to me, that you're not going to get that. You're not going to get just a forced blanket of this sort of development or historic preservation sort of designation on something without people really having a buy-in.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I won't be supporting any sort of separating this out. I think we need to move this forward as presented. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Peck. In particular, and I wasn't quite fast enough to catch the letter that Councilmember Christ was referring to, but it's intended to incentivize owners of historic landmarks to keep them properly maintained, as opposed to allowing. So can you remind me the?
Sure. So the term I referred to as far as the maintenance requirements, it really is more geared at a concept called demolition by neglect.
Yes, I understand that.
It's really geared less at specifically saying that homeowners have to do X, Y, and Z, but it's more saying you can't let your property rot to the point where you can't maliciously ignore your maintenance. It really has more to do with that malicious non-maintenance.
Correct. And that wasn't what I had trouble with. What I have trouble with is how the incentive to do the right thing is supposed to work. Because code enforcement does not go around inspecting properties. Code enforcement operates on a complaint basis. So, I don't think people should be allowed to either purchase or apply, have a property designated as a historic landmark, and subsequently change their mind and allow it to deteriorate to the point where it has to be demolished. But what I don't understand is how the incentive works. Can you walk me through that?
So this really is less about an incentive for maintenance and more just making it clear that there's the expectation that you would maintain your property as you would any other home.
So then how is the expectation enforced? What makes people comply?
Eugene, you want to take a stab at this?
Mayor and Council, Eugene May, City Attorney. So it would be a violation of the code. We have updated the enforcement and penalty sections to add administrative civil penalties as a enforcement tool, as well as just straightforward summons into municipal code for a municipal court for a violation of the municipal code.
Okay, so that's the association of the language that I couldn't quite make, was what causes the penalty to be invoked? That's the part I don't understand.
If you deliberately cause or negligently fail to prevent significant deterioration.
Right.
That's
Okay.
the standard,
And so,
which is new.
yeah, so either someone would have to report you that this deterioration is happening, and then the city would come in and say, hey, you're going to be fined if you don't fix this property, or they might apply for demolition, in which case the city could say, well, we're going to deny this because you are see, that's where I don't understand how the steps work. So that they say, okay, well, we're not going to demolish it, but then they're not fined. They just back off the demolition?
Well,
What
I think-
happens? How does that work?
A primary goal of most of our code is compliance.
Yeah.
So if you were to come in for a demolition permit and you were found to be in violation of this maintenance requirements, the expectation would be you would comply, you would maintain your property. And if you don't, well, then we would use our enforcement tools of either the administrative civil penalty or a summons to municipal court.
So would they then, when they made the application and we found out that and we determined, who determines that the property has been allowed to deteriorate?
I mean, I think it would be code enforcement, maybe in conjunction.
It's a combination
with
of staff in conjunction with representatives from the Historic Preservation Commission. So it would be Historic Preservation staff, code enforcement staff.
So-
So we're all really working together.
Then somebody, is Historic Preservation the quasi judicial entity that assesses the penalty? I just want to understand what the steps are.
And that's something we can discuss with Glenn if you decide to bring this back for the next meeting as well. We can get
Right.
some additional information on that.
I mean, I think the intent is desirable, I just don't see how it works. And I'd be happy to have Councilmember Rodriguez explain it, because maybe he understands, but I don't.
Is there anyone else on council that does not understand the steps for demolition?
No, it's not steps for demolition, that's pretty clear.
Well, steps for the penalty. How do we get to the penalty? And who enforces the penalty?
It doesn't sound like anybody understands.
Well, I do.
Well, then you could explain it.
No, my point is, this might be a off-site conversation that you have with Eugene, and because if the rest of us understand this, then you're the only one, and Chris, maybe you could have a private conversation or an off-council conversation with him.
Huh, I think that this is what public hearings are for.
So if I may,
Okay.
I'm going to
It's not a public hearing, no.
Yeah.
So if I
Okay,
may,
please do.
there are multiple ways that this can come to the attention of staff. So to the example that you gave earlier is if a resident says they're not maintaining the house. Another aspect of it is in terms of our historic preservation staff and others evaluating properties. Another option is that they come in for a demolition permit because they want to scrape the site and they haven't maintained it. So it can come in from many different areas. When it comes in, then you, like any other code enforcement case or building code issue, you then evaluate what's happened here. And so
And you is code enforcement, the Historic Preservation Commission?
it'll more than likely be a combination of code enforcement, building inspection, historic preservation, staff that look at this, and you're going to start evaluating things. When was a property purchased? How long has the person owned the property? And you start looking at the records and you start evaluating what has occurred. You then go through and like in code enforcement, we issue an NOV, saying notice of violation. That's then your obligation as the property owner to bring it into compliance. That's Eugene's point of voluntary compliance. If then they don't bring it into compliance, just like code enforcement and other issues, you then go to court. And then that's where, at the end of the day, it's going to be the court that really is hearing the case, like on other code enforcement issues, in terms of bringing it into compliance. That's a general answer to how you go through the process.
Okay, that seems very clear. It also seems that it was an appropriate question to me.
I agree that it seems like penalizing someone with a moratorium on a building permit after some infraction has happened kind of keeps them from actually maintaining the property further. It's like the horse is already out of the barn, and now you're penalizing them. It's to me, they're probably going to need a building permit if they've let it deteriorate or they haven't taken care of it. So penalizing them by, saying, okay, now you didn't ask for a certificate of appropriateness, which maybe they didn't know, maybe they had an emergency. Now it's a year before they can get a building permit. That just, I don't follow the way of thinking. You want to weigh in, Councilor Rodriguez? He's like, I'm not going to get. Okay. So, I would like to move that we separate the two first sections, which would be 2.56070 and 2.56180, and vote on that separately from the last three sections, which is 2.56.220 and 2.56230, and there's a third one, 2.56.240. And I need a second.
So that fails for a lack of a second.
It's 2.20-2024-5 as presented in first reading.
Second. Is there any more discussion on this motion? Councilor Martin?
Yes, I agree with Councilmember McCoy that we need to move this through because I think it's important. I also feel that if the mechanisms can't be better elucidated by the staff, I will be voting against it on second reading. So, I'm going to vote for it now, but we got to do better than this.
Councilor McCoy moved to 2024-05, and that was seconded by Councilor Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote. Mine isn't coming up, so it disappeared. Yeah, so, hold on. There we go. Sorry that took so long. And that passes 6-1 with Councilor Christ in opposition. And Councilor Christ, you also pulled 9H.
So 9H is regarding the Bond Farm inclusionary housing requirement for that development. And inclusionary housing is not the same as affordable housing. So it means inclusionary housing means offering the same housing opportunity to those of lesser means as we do to those of greater means. And if we want to level the playing field when it comes to privilege, inclusionary housing is pretty much how it's done. Now, Bond Farm is a mature neighborhood, a mature school, has mature trees. It's got a good culture. Children raised in mature neighborhoods do better in school, have higher graduation rates, better self-confidence, and develop friendships that help them succeed later in life. And there are very few development opportunities left in mature neighborhoods. So as a council, I'm going to ask that we do everything possible to ensure inclusionary units are included in this neighborhood and that we don't accept the other piece of land, which is on 1900 Terry, 1916 Terry, because that is a very different paradigm for people seeking to raise a family. Is there a representative here who'd like to speak to the
Councilmember Chris Molly O'Donnell, the housing director. I'm here
thank
to
you, Molly.
represent. We do have the developer here as well, if needed. Do you have any questions specifically?
Well, what will it take to do 8 units of inclusionary housing in Bond Farm?
So, according to our inclusionary housing code, developers do have an option. And in order to elect the land donation option, multiple requirements need to be met. And each of those requirements has been met on this site. So in accordance with code, this is a viable option within our inclusionary housing program. To build the units on site, I don't have specific numbers about what that would cost. The developer may, but we do know that the cost to build them on site would be more than the land donation option. And so if the city then accepts the donated land, then we would go ahead and leverage other sources to build on it, bringing in outside sources to help cover that gap and build the units. It is also important to note that the developer, if they built on site, would have to build 8 units, but we can get up to, I'm sorry, I have to remind myself, I think 54. We can fit up to 54 units on this site, so that leveraging opportunity is there.
How much is the land worth at 1916 Terry?
I think the representative from the developer is coming up.
Great.
So land value is Mark Young. I think you guys know me, 1313 Spruce. Land value is typically evaluated based upon what you can do with a property. So when you look at a property, and people price things differently, when you look at a property, you kind of determine what's the highest and best use. So when I was looking at this property on Terry Street, I realized that we could easily do a multifamily structure there, which would be a substantially more affordable entry-level housing than what we would be able to provide at Bond Farm. So if we can build 54 units there, it's probably worth $30,000 a door. So that would be about $1.5 million, something like that. I think that, so the chance of us building housing on the Bond Farm site is 0. As far as affordable housing goes, we have the option to buy out, or we have the option to donate land on the farm itself, which would also be an option for us. So I think this is a better option. Plus, we've been talking to a number of national builders who are interested in developing the Bond Farm site and who have product that ranges in that $400,000 range. And they have a policy of not building affordable housing. So it's going to be very difficult for me if we don't. And I think this is a really good exchange, if you think about it. This site on Terry Street, you can build 54 units. And actually, I think it's 60, but 54 is the number that they said, so we'll go with that. I think it's very easy to see how a purely affordable housing project that can take advantage of TIF funding and all kinds of other sort of resources to develop affordable housing can produce 54 units here, which will really help as far as the affordable housing needs in the city goes, compared to our 7.5 or 8 units that we would have at Bond Farm.
Do you build multifamily units,
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes, I do.
So if we didn't take the land on Terry Street, you might consider building there multifamily units in addition to the Bond Farm development?
Yeah, we wouldn't build 54. I mean, we would build a different project. So I don't have the background for building affordable housing. We'd be looking for some partner who would come in and do it. Or if we were to build, we'd build probably 13, 14 units and sell them at market rate, less the 12% affordable housing requirement.
Yeah. And just the parcel of land, what would you sell that for if you were going to sell that parcel?
$1.5 million.
Okay.
You know, maybe even a little bit more. If it's not affordable housing, and if we can, let's say for instance, we could easily do 35, 40 units there in a non-affordable range, because you get some bonuses, right, when you build affordable. We might get more than $30,000 a door. We might get $45,000 a door.
So the price you would want for the units at Bond Farm, if you had 7 to 8 units, I think
Yeah.
the percentage is somewhere in between there. You want $400,000 a unit?
Do I?
Yeah, I mean, is that your sale price for the units?
No, I'm not. First of all, I'm not in a position to commit to the sale price because we don't even understand what all the engineering costs are yet. We don't know how much it's going to cost us to develop the land and get it ready to go. But I do know that national builders have price points, and they look at price points. These guys build for like $130, $140 a foot. When I'm building, it's closer to $200 a foot, maybe $180. So, and then, as you know, we've got the cash in lieu is $13 a foot, so it adds quite a bit to the burden of the project.
But donating this land would be in lieu of the in lieu fee?
Yes, it would.
Okay, so that would remove that fee.
That's the intention. Yeah. The thought was.
And if you built inclusionary units, you also would not have the in lieu fee?
That's right.
Okay, so.
But it's very hard to do that like, if we have $3 million land cost. That's what it cost us. Mm-hmm. And then we've got probably another $3 million in off-sites and in-site infrastructure work. So already we're, at a pretty high price per unit with 63 units.
Right.
So, I mean, essentially, that drives the price point of the project. So if you can have, we think the units, our all-in costs are going to be around $85,000 a unit for the land and infrastructure and such. So if I have to donate 7 units, that has a value of about $600,000. If I donate land on site versus paying the cash in lieu. If I pay the cash in lieu and the units are 1,700 square feet, it's like I think just under $1 million cash in lieu. Which we would pay the cash in lieu rather than build affordable units there.
Okay, Harold, do you have a comment?
Yeah, so I want to kind of go back to the inclusionary housing ordinance because I want to clarify some points. So one option is you can build the units on site, and you can do that on your own, and it doesn't go back to council. The second option is you can choose cash in lieu, and they can pay the cash in lieu, and that doesn't go back to council. That's something that they can just choose to do. The third option that they can look at is they can build on their own on the off-site. That does come to council. And then the other option is the land donation, which also comes to council for approval. And so those are the mechanisms that any developer has the ability to choose from. And I wanted to point that out because it's not an either or. there's a host of options that the council put into that policy that that the developers can choose from.
Once again, Molly O'Donnell, I just want to add that once we were considering raising the fee in lieu and modifying that calculation, we started hearing from some developers that they were starting to look at any of the other options before which had barely, if not at all, been used. This is one of the first examples of a developer looking at using some of our other options built into the IH program rather than the fee in lieu. And we expect to see more.
And then, to Molly's point, what the inclusionary housing ordinance requires in terms of staff recommendation in bringing this back is that A, the infrastructure has to be at site. We look at being able to produce more units on the donated land than on the number of units that would be produced as part of the project itself. So there's criteria that we evaluate before we can say we're bringing that back to council. And so essentially what we're saying is based on the guidance from the ordinance, this land does all of those things. And now it's council's decision to say yes or no. In that, the reason why I brought up the different options is because should council say no to this, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to build the units on site, because they still have the option to pay the fee in lieu and just not build any product. They're paying the fee in lieu. So that's why I wanted to clarify the different steps.
So there's the criteria that the land has to meet, but then the fifth criteria.
Correct.
That is correct.
Yeah.
So for a land donation, I could hear from here.
Wait
but,
for it all to plug in.
for a land donation option, that we do bring that for council approval.
Yeah. Yeah, just one more thing. So I'm not saying that you give up the idea of Terry. What I'm suggesting maybe is both. And in the past, we've taken a lot of the burden to the developer. And I have some ideas how to share that burden. But I'm going to let the other counselors weigh in.
It's actually Martin.
Yeah, I think it was me first and then Sean, and if he's willing, I would like this, I can be brief here. Because I think what we know already is that Mark has chosen this option because it's the most cost-effective for him. And the city, speaking from the previous administration, really liked this option because they think they can do really well at leveraging that land and building affordable housing on it. But we have a third policy consideration, which is that the city, based on its housing needs assessment and the also the requests of our primary employers, or the priorities that our primary employers have set, the city has a strong need for attainable housing. And I believe, and I just want clarification for this, is that Mr. Young has said that his the organization that he wants to partner with to develop Bond Farm would be the most likely to develop attainable units, to be able to develop attainable units if the affordable units were out of the picture by this land donation. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, that's all I needed to know.
Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Mark Young, thank you for coming here. I'm sorry to pull you back up and down and everything like that. But I just want to, there's some folks that are probably watching from the Bond Farm Group.
Sure.
And just so that they're clear that we're not expanding anything from what we agreed on.
63 units.
There you go.
No more than 63.
It's, so I wanted them to hear that out there. And that if you're talking about attainable units because of who you're partnering with for for building
Yes.
purposes, that sounds, even better. And in this area here, we meet a couple of our transportation goals. and those sort of things because of where this is located in North Longmont. So we address the issue around affordable housing and the needs that are associated with that for transportation, you know, within a block of Main Street or so to get, you know, on bus routes and other things like that. So I'm in support of seeing this move forward as it's presented, just because I think that, you know, we want to make sure that we adhere to, you know, kind of the agreement that we made when you brought this forward, and you're willing to work with the community, surrounding community members to come to some sort of consensus and the size and the scope of the growth there.
Thank
so I appreciate your efforts here and like what I generally see. Thank you.
Should I sit down?
Yes, Mark, you may sit down. Diane, would you like to move the ordinance 9H?
I would like to say that we are actually talking about the same things, I think. We're talking about 63 units, 8 of which would be attainable.
No.
I'm saying, well, I'm just recapping. Okay. So I'm talking about 8 of those would be attainable. Now it sounds like there's a comment that there is attainable in the mix with the 63. And if that actually qualifies for our inclusionary housing, why are we doing this land trade?
So, Molly, you're going to help me on this one. He's building 63 housing units, of which he's required to build 8 affordable housing units if they build them on site, which are permanently deed restricted. If the developer chooses not to build those on site, then they have the choice of paying fee in lieu, building the units off-site at a different. My mic. All right, so I'll say it again. So the inclusionary housing ordinance is really about affordable housing and the requirements that they have to build. So at 63 units, they have to build 8 capital A affordable housing units to meet the inclusionary housing ordinance. If they choose not to build the 8 units, then they can choose to pay cash in lieu versus building those units. And so those aren't attainable, those are affordable. So if it's home ownership, that will be below 80% AMI for home ownership. What I think the question was is that if I buy this land and donate it to meet the affordable housing requirement, then that's going to allow me to build theoretically attainable housing units at a price point, let's say 500, 400,000. When you do the land donation within the ordinance, so when you talk about fee in lieu and the attainable housing, and you talk about the construction of attainable housing within the ordinance, there are offsets built within the ordinance that says if I'm going to hit these middle tier price points, that actually reduces the amount of affordable housing that I need to build if you're doing it on site. And so if you're building between 80 and 100% AMI, you get a 60% reduction. Help me with that. It's been modified. I can't remember the numbers.
Revised.
So you get a reduction to your affordable housing requirement.
Harold, just to clarify, the inclusionary housing doesn't ever mention attainable?
It's a separate ordinance.
Has to be below $400,000 at this point.
It does mention attainable in that when we talk about the table that we've built that said here's the price points between 80 and 120% AMI, that sets it. Within the inclusionary housing ordinance, if you build attainable as part of your project, you have a reduction in your affordable housing requirement on the 12%, depending on where the price points of those units hit. think we used 80 to 100% AMI, 100 to 110% AMI as a category, and 110 to 120% AMI. That actually reduces what you have to build. But when you choose to do the land donation, there's no offset. You're choosing to give land instead of building it, so even if you build attainable, you don't reduce your inclusionary housing requirement.
And he's building attainable on the Bond Farm, 63 units.
To be determined.
To be determined.
So it's certainly market rate units and considering attainable units. If the land donation is approved, that helps the finances to potentially put in attainable units on site with the market rate.
If we keep building segregated housing, we're never going to have true inclusionary housing. In other words, the same equal opportunities for families who are trying for a step up. And that's a concern. We can't always build multifamily, 50 units all together. That just isn't adequate for families. And especially for raising children who need some of the same opportunities that other citizens are enjoying. If we're going to do inclusionary, I suggest that we be a little bit more bold, not necessarily put the burden on the developer, but consider ways that the city can partner to make sure that some of those units are attainable for families in that area. And the other question that I have for you too is, do we have any other developments that are similar to Bond Farm in mature neighborhoods?
I would have to bring planning staff up to answer that question specifically. Are you asking if other developments, market rate developments, are proposing something similar to a land donation, or just strictly on the development side?
No, I'm asking if we have any other neighborhoods that are mature where there is room to develop more housing. And I don't know of any in town, but if you do, I'd like to hear about it.
So, I think that we can push that off for a different conversation, only because to do what you want on some of the things, we have to have a code change in our IZO ordinance. And we do have developments, and I'm going to say the Mustang that we heard about in our pre-session, that has inclusionary, attainable, affordable home ownership, rental. And it is a partnership with the city that we have to do. It's very complicated. Yeah. So that's very complicated. My question to you is, do you want this ordinance to be passed as is, or do you want to do something different with it? I'm going to ask. I hear you.
We could reject, yeah.
Mayor, members of council,
Yeah.
Tim Hull, Assistant City Attorney. The options that I believe are before you right now are you can approve
Yes.
this or you can reject it.
Right.
And then the developer still has to satisfy IH, and so they'll find a way to satisfy it. They could come back with the same proposal but modified slightly. They could pay the fee in lieu. They have all of the IH compliance options at that point.
So,
Well, it seems like what we want is a unicorn, a third option, a third middle road. So, and I think this option for the developer is a good one. So I'm going to move that we move 9H forward.
okay, it's been moved by Diane Christ to move 9H and seconded by Councilor McCoy. Is there any more discussion? I think we've discussed this a lot. So let's vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you, staff.
Mayor, can we have a break before the next item? We need to
I
change.
think so.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now at the general business portion of our agenda. And this is a bill 2024-07. I'm going to read it now. Are we ready? A bill for an administrative ordinance approving the purchase and sale and development
I'll take
agreement
this.
conveying 200 Bountiful Avenue and 905 Harvest Moon Drive to Vertical LLC for an affordable, attainable housing development. And if I am correct, this is the Mustang project? Okay. So, are we going to have a presentation?
We are going to have a presentation.
Molly, I'll turn it over to you.
I think Harold is going to kick us off first.
Then I'll turn it over to Harold.
We're gonna start on this. So obviously, we put the information in the council packet on this project and wanted to talk about how did we get here. This project actually started a few years ago, and it was really associated with the 9 acres of property that we purchased for affordable housing, excuse me, associated with the Costco project. So in that, Diamond G Concrete, Reggie Golden, and his family sold us the 9 acres for $3.45 a square foot. That's all in public record. That was done in 2022. When we initially purchased the property, that's when we started working with the Longmont Housing. That was at the point where we were engaged with the Longmont Housing Authority and taking on that work. And we really went and we're thinking about the traditional affordable housing work that you've seen in other projects where it's a rental product. As we were moving through that conversation and continuing to move forward in the Costco project, Diamond G, again, Reggie Golden, indicated, and he was starting to hear the conversations with council regarding attainable housing and the need for attainable housing in our community. And so he indicated that he would be willing to sell the remaining 7.28 acres that's adjacent to the property that we purchased to look at with a sub-market rate condition and really building that attainable housing product. And that was really something that was front and center in his mind. At that time, we weren't sure how we were going to move through this and approach it, but I was introduced to Walker Thrash of Vertical Construction. Walker is behind me. And in that introduction, one of the things that he's been working on is really trying to crack the code for attainable housing. I will say that I'm not sure when we got into the affordable housing conversation, I think that definitely stressed everyone out. And we will talk to you about why that stressed us all out as we were trying to move through it. But Walker then met Reggie Golden, so the landowner and the developer were aligned on the values of cracking the attainable housing challenge in our community. But what was even more important is the values that they were expressing in terms of why they wanted to do this actually were in alignment with the values that you all have established via various affordable and attainable housing policies. And it was really focused on a couple of things that we set as core principles as we had the conversation. So this became an unsolicited offer from Vertical Construction and Walker Thrash as we were looking at it. Main component, restrict to lower price points. The second bullet point that you see on this is perhaps the most important in that was an open book process. And what I mean by open book process is that we were able to see all of the different components of what it takes to build housing. This conversation has been going on for 2 years. We've been following council direction in terms of negotiating this housing development agreement. And I will say that we've learned a lot throughout this process. What I will tell you is building a for sale product is completely different than building the rental product that we've been engaged in to this point. So that's kind of how we got here. Council has adopted an attainable housing ordinance that we're utilizing in this process. At the last council meeting in December, council agreed to the purchase of the 7.2 acre 8 parcel. And I would be remiss if I didn't, I don't think we have this in the presentation, but I would be remiss if I didn't really point out what we were able to do in this. And so the 7.28 acres was about $10 a square foot. As part of this, we actually ran an appraisal. And again, the 7.28 acres is conditioned upon attainable housing. We ran an appraisal, and the appraisal came in at around $18.35 a square foot. So if you look at what we paid for the 9 acres and what we paid for the 7 acres in terms of being able to do this project, that was a really good deal. That was really the interest that Diamond G and the Golden family had in really contributing to affordable and attainable housing in our community, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk to council about that. That was a significant piece of bringing this together. What I would say, but for that, we wouldn't be talking about this project today. The numbers wouldn't have worked. Molly?
Members of council, Molly O'Donnell once again. Starting with a project summary, talking about what we intend to do on the site. So here's our project location. You can see Highway 119, Ken Pratt Boulevard, up at the top. It is located just south of Costco. This is Quail Road, so we've got the rec center right here, and then Main Street is not far off the screen here. So we do have transit service to the rec center. We also have the left-hand Creek Greenway Trail here, and so that is within walking distance of this site as well. So in total, it's a 16.4 acre site. So talking about the project and concept, at this point in time, we're planning on about 185 units constructed in 4 phases. At least 55 of those would be permanently deed restricted, affordable to buyers below 80% of the area median income. And the remainder, which is about 130 in the current calculations, would be deed restricted as affordable to buyers between 180 and 120% of area median income. We have a mix of townhomes, so attached and single-family detached product proposed. Overall density is 11.3 units per acre, and we'll get a little bit more into the next steps later, but assuming the entitlements and everything goes on schedule, we could be breaking ground later this year and with a 5-year construction cycle. Speaking quickly on the units, because Prop 123, we have a goal, the city has a goal to produce 304 units that qualify under Prop 123 by December 31st, 2026, and then feasibly another 3-year cycle would kick on from there. This, because you're allowed to count for sale product below 100% AMI, with the current proposal, we'd be producing 60 units that meet our Prop 123 goals. So that's 20% of our 3-year cycle. It wouldn't be as perfect because we're constructing this over a phase, but just to get a gauge on how that helps our city goals.
When you look at the site plan, there's a couple of things that I wanted to point out to council. So when we say approximately 185 units of for sale product, it's because we haven't gone through the last stages of the entitlement process. And so one of the things we want to be very clear on with council is that as we're looking at design standards and some of the other issues, it theoretically could adjust the unit count. We think we're pretty close on this in what we're looking at. The other piece that I wanted to point out is when you look at the density of 11.3 units per acre, what we're really finding as we start looking at what really goes into play in terms of the cost of housing, you need to maximize the density on these projects to truly be able to hit the price points on the affordable and the attainable housing side. You can't do this type of project in more of the suburban style development. It just won't work financially. And that was another big component in terms of what we were looking at. Finally, and we've said this before, I think we've all been racking our brains to try to figure out, has anyone been aware of a project like this anywhere else? And we really can't. And the reason that we can't is because you do see attainable housing projects. You don't really ever find attainable housing projects with 30% permanently affordable deed restrictions in here, and you'll see some slides as to to why that really comes into play. As I indicated, we've been working on this for a while, and it really was struggling to be able to include the affordable housing ownership opportunities in this because it was a pro forma buster. And it took I think we went through 6 or 7 different pro formas. So 9, we're on pro forma 9 as we brought it to you, and trying to figure that out. And the big issue was the affordable housing side on this. Okay.
So here's a figure showing our project site plan as it stands today. Really, the intent here is that we won't be able to distinguish the affordable units from the attainable units, or really from a market unit that is in the vicinity. It's to hide the wealth in the back, so driveways and cars being a sign of wealth, putting those on the backside so that the front of these units are walkable, promote neighbor interactions, and really just have a vibrant neighborhood to encourage a sense of community. That's the idea here. So in these, there's 4 phases shown, and the first phase is down in the lower right corner, and that's what is proposed to start construction in 2024. And there are chunks that are certain similar typed units, so the affordable townhome and the attainable detached. They're in some chunks, but it's really mixed throughout the whole neighborhood. This is just a concept that that Vertical is working on in another community that would be potentially similar but customized for Longmont, just to show the level of aesthetic design that's going into these so far. So talking about project phasing, we've already worked on the concept. That's what you're seeing presented here tonight. We've done tests on underwriting just to gauge if this is a project that could move forward on the finance side. We have done preliminary design, or I should say Vertical has done preliminary design, and tonight the development agreement is really the next critical path in order for the development team to really start to invest in the architecture and getting the entitlements deliverables in. Moving to final design and permitting and finalizing that financing would be the next step, all going in lockstep. And then the intent would to close on the transfer of the land, the 2 parcels from the city to Vertical, and initiate the process for construction here at the end of the year.
Real quick, I want to point out, why does the development agreement occur at this point? Because to date, all the parties have been spending money. When we start moving into the final design and permitting, the amount of money that you spend is drastically different. You go from tens of thousands of dollars to really 7 digits in terms of what you have to expend. And so it really is needing that certainty to continue moving forward in the process based on the capital outlay that's going to have to occur in order to get through the process.
So we wanted to give some price points just to settle this in with what does this really look like in terms of community impact and who could live here. So what we have here are sample price points. So this is based on our 2023 maximum sales prices for affordable and attainable units. Because this will be constructed in phases, these are not the exact numbers that the project will be subject to since we update that every year, but just for a theoretical exercise, if all of them were constructed today, then this are the bounds within the project would be working with. So this just is hopefully helping to give you an idea of what type of household or what type of income a household brings in could qualify for these, and what those max sales prices that the developer would be required to withhold to would look like if this was today. But in reality, we are working with a draft pro forma, and the developer does want to build in some flexibility for the market to make sure we're not just planning on everything at the max, and you have to have some wiggle room for just working within the market and buyer qualifications. So again, using today, 2023, maximum sales prices, that's what you see on the high-end estimate here. The low-end estimate is what the numbers that we are working with through the draft process in developing this pro forma. So the developer does intend to sell these units not right at the max. And really that does help tell the story when you see the city investment coming in later.
Really focusing on the lower end estimate, I think, one of the reasons why we wanted to give you all a range is because if we've learned anything over the last 2 years is that inflation is a beast in terms of projects and what that can do to it. So we are focused on the low end side of this. There are things that can change it. Price of materials, goods that you need to build this, interest rates, labor, all of those things. And so we're really focused on, we're really focused on that lower end. Had some conversations with some individuals. And part of what we've talked about is you don't want to be at that higher end number because it really starts changing the pool of buyers that you can have in it. So you really want to kind of hit that middle ground in this. And in the event that something starts shifting with house prices, you don't want people at the top end because then it could put them in a bad position down the road. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. One of the things that I wanted to talk to council about on this, and I alluded to it in the last conversation prior to this agenda item, and probably in a lot of conversations with council regarding affordable and attainable housing. So, when you look at what are the headwinds when you come into a project like this, we put these cost drivers in order of influence. And so the first one that really comes into play is land cost. As we've been evaluating what it takes to actually build affordable and attainable housing, and you look at the cost of land in Boulder County and Longmont, depending on what that cost, depending on how much you pay for the land, that could immediately just eliminate options because it just won't work in the pro forma. And that's why when we talk about the land cost that we paid for this, it really fits well because it's allowing us to collectively manage it. I've talked about material prices and interest rate and labor. And the last piece is fees, but it's actually it's a big number collectively, but when you look at the overall cost, it's not the one that immediately is that we're trying to solve for. When you slide over and you look at the other side of the slide and you look at construction cost on the affordable units, the cost of constructing those units, and this is a cost per unit, is $94,000 the sale price is $94,000 less than the actual construction price to build an affordable townhome for ownership, and that's a smaller townhome. A slightly larger townhome is the sales price is $86,000 less than the actual construction price, and we've already taken land cost out, and we've taken permit fees out. And I thought this was a really important piece to talk to the council about in terms of this is what made this project hard because that really is creating the gap that we're trying to fill, and we also know it's the housing that's most needed in our community. And when we looked at this, when you look at what we typically do for home ownership, this is less than we typically do. But they also have to buy the land, and so if you normalize for land, it's pretty typical on the affordable home ownership side.
So let's talk about what that investment's going to look like as proposed. So we're splitting this up into a couple of categories because there's a lot of moving pieces. So what we're calling the non-city funds. This is leverage funding that the city has brought in, but it is not local city dollars. We spent $4.65 million between our ARPA allocation and a state grant called the IHOI grant, the Innovative Affordable Housing Incentives Program. We obtained that funding and put it towards purchasing that land. So that's been done. In addition, the developer proposes requesting a 100% fee waiver, which we'll get into in a moment. We're going to dive into that a little bit closer. But overall, the value of the fee waiver for affordable is $1.33 million, and for attainable is $3.65 million. So it's important to note that that is not direct city dollars, but it is unearned revenue if this project as proposed came in as a market rate instead. So it's something that the city is not collecting in this proposal. So that totals 9.62 million of what the city could put into it that is not cash. On the other side, there is still a gap. As Harold mentioned, this is primarily because of the affordable units. We have figured out through this exercise that attainable can be built with reduced land and fee waivers. But to do affordable, it takes deep incentive. And so what is proposed here is to fund this through the affordable and a combination of the affordable and attainable housing funds over a period of 5 years. Or in that same timeline, we could go out for more leveraged funding, such as Prop 123 or the new county tax funds that would be available in about 2025. And if so, then we could swap out that cash investment. Overview of the total project cost. So the entire project is estimated at $77.8 million to build. With the city's investment pulling out that $6 million, the gap, the developer is really at risk for that $71 million. And this is considered a high-risk project when you're building this much income-qualified housing with no market rate units to balance it out. And so you'll see how that kind of comes into play when we talk about the attainable fee waiver piece.
And that, I believe that's 71 million before interest. So interest is on top of that. So when you look at this, so when we look at what we're investing and the risk that we're taking, I mean, the developer's taking a lot of risk on this project. So some key deal points on this that we wanted to talk about. So one of the things that we work through is the development fee to the developer on this project. And at the end of the day, we agreed on an $8 million fixed development fee. And that's important because it's not based on the sales price and other issues. I mean, it's fixed. We know what it is. When you look at it, it's 11.1% of return on the developer's investment that we talked about in the previous slide. It's a 9.8% return on the total project cost. And this is one of the things that we learned in the process. I think a lot of people think that developers set their return based on what they want to achieve. But what we've also learned is that the lenders, actually, and the underwriters on the construction side play a pivotal role in requiring that return on investment. And why do the lenders play a role? Because if things like inflation and other challenges come up, or let's say you have issues with the infrastructure on the project, it's not like you can go get another loan. They have to pull that out of their return. And so what's different in this is that it's a fixed fee. The other thing that's different about this, and again, when we talk about alignment on values, and really, I wish this would have been my idea. This was really Walker's idea, saying, you know, we're all trying to get something unique done. And so if there's any savings to the project cost or excess proceeds based on the pro forma, the city will receive 75% of that, and then the developer will receive 25% of that. So what that really does is the $6 million investment, if we have any savings or excess proceeds, actually is reduced once we finish the project. You know, a couple of key points. The land is not going to be transferred until closing and all conditions are met. We've talked about this on some other housing projects in that, you know, Walker has tested whether or not this can be underwritten. I have seen letters from lenders that are saying it can be underwritten, but that's just to get the project ready to go. Once the decision is made is when you really start getting focused on finalizing all those details, and all the conditions have to be met before we transfer the land and we close on the property and begin the project. So there's still a lot of work that we have to do on it. And the other thing that we did in this is that funding is distributed by project phase to minimize risk. And what we mean by that is you can look at the agreement in the packet, and we're putting, I believe, $2.5 million in phase one. And then we have different phases where we're bringing dollars in. We're not putting all of that money up front. We'll put it in an escrow account at the beginning of the phase, and then spend down on that, and we'll obviously have approval of those costs. Once we begin the second phase, we'll put in the second amount into the escrow account. And so it's not all going in at once, because one of the things that we've said in this process is it's a risky project. And, you know, especially on the affordable side and qualifying people to buy it, you know, we're going to be watching the sales on this real time as we're moving forward. And so we thought that was the best way to minimize the risk to the city in this process. The reason why the first phase is higher than the other phases is because we also figured out to adjust the pro forma that if we can put the $2.5 million on the front end, where it's basically covering that initial infrastructure cost and the horizontal side, what that actually does is allow us to reduce the carrying cost from an interest standpoint if you had to get a construction loan on this, which did make a difference to the gap. I believe the gap was about $500,000 more
In total before we.
Yeah, so it was about $6.5 million until we chose to fund it with that upfront of $2.5 to manage that cost.
All right, so let's dive into the attainable housing fee waiver piece of this. So first, just to clarify this first off, with the modifications to the fee waiver program that council approved last year, 2023, this project qualifies for 100% fee waiver at the administrative level, so you don't need to consider the affordable fee waivers, but that it is valued at over $1.3 million. Moving to our attainable fee waiver, this is our first project to utilize our new attainable fee waiver program. And so I wanted to outline how this project scored against the criteria that council set for the program here a few months ago. So I'm just going to walk you through a couple of key pieces. We have a minimum of 5 units written into the development agreement at the 100% AMI level. Right now, the current price points that are showing in the pro forma, there's a significant number more than that, but to build in the safety net for the market over the next 5 years, that we at least wrote in this minimum. And then a minimum of 15 at 110% AMI. And then moving to our exceptional benefit to the community, this project has some sustainability features being built in. It will be 100% electric. It's being, looking at that neighborhood piece, we want the indistinguishable aesthetic where it really feels like an integrated mixed income neighborhood, walkable, that sense of community. And then really the big one on this one also is that it's a pilot project. This is a model that has not been tested anywhere in the nation that we know. And if this is successful, then this could be a model that's replicated. So that has some value. For the employer units, so the city is investing as the employer in this project, and in return, we would get preference on a first sale of 24 units for city employees. That might be peppered throughout the phases. We'll have to see how once we start collecting interested buyers and running through a lottery process and qualifications, we'll see how that spreads out in the project, but 24 total would be dedicated. The rest of them, outside of those city-dedicated units, would be for employment in Longmont. So again, this is those that work in Longmont, moving to Longmont, and then there are some exceptions to meet fair housing rules, specifically for those with disabilities, and there's some things around retired employees as well. And then the rest, we have 68 units that are currently set at 120% AMI. And so recall that this is only the attainable units. We're not counting the affordable units in here. So they're considered separately. The total value of 100% fee waiver, which this project does qualify to come to council to request, is valued at $3.6 million, just over that. So I will say that overall, this project does meet the minimum thresholds required to receive the fee waiver in our program. It's for sale product only. The developer will restrict the sales prices in accordance with the city's maximums. We're going to income qualify the buyers. We'll have enter into an agreement with the city, which is happening here tonight. And the developer is participating in an open book partnership. So those are some of the key qualifiers to get to this point. Because they scored 75 points, they also qualify to come to council to request 100% fee waiver, which is part of the proposal tonight. Some of this is what you have seen here in recent months, but the project will follow the attainable fee waiver deed restriction model. So this is considered a large investment project, which means it would have the 10-year rolling term that's our wealth generation balancing scale on our program. If the homeowner sells before 10 years, the sale is then restricted to our maximum sales price limits, and that deed restriction rolls over to the next buyer, up to 3 sales. There is an element we included in the code language for the fee waiver program that there is an opportunity for developers to come and negotiate certain aspects and request council consideration of certain aspects in order to make the project work. And in order to qualify for that request, you have to build a fully sub-market development with at least 25% affordable, which this project is doing. So the requested special provision here that we would be building in is a buyout option. And this is something that was really driven by the lenders to minimize risk, because they are worried about having enough qualified buyers to let these homes not sit on the market too long. So this proposal would be, if a homeowner desires to sell before the 10-year restriction falls off at market rate, they could, with a payback provision, that if they sell in their 8th year, there would be 6% of the market price paid back to the program. That would be back to the city. In the 9th year, 5% of that market price, or in the 10th year, before you complete that deed restriction timeline, 4% of the market price. So there's a little example here up on screen just to see what those proceeds could look like back into the city fund, which does, it is more than what the fee waiver received for that unit was valued at. So it is extra benefit back to the city in this instance.
So a couple of things I want to point out. This is only for the attainable houses. The 55 affordable houses will have permanent deed restrictions on that. Part of why so I want to clarify this too. When it's a fully sub-market project, and we talk about the risk, what we were seeing is, and we talked about it a little bit when council adopted the policy, is when you have a housing market like this, and then you say, oh, you have these deed restrictions, then it does this. And then when you have the volume that you have in terms of the affordable and the permanent deed restrictions, you start seeing a shrinking. And so there was really concern about having a robust enough individuals who will purchase to really ensure that we do this. And that's where Molly is really referring to the lender piece on this, and why we felt like in this case it made sense. And it was because it's 100% sub-market with a high percentage of affordable for sale.
And I would clarify that we show the 8th, 9th, and 10th year in these buyout options. But before that, there is no buyout option. You either roll over the deed restriction or you wait the 10 years.
There is the caveat, if you have a significant hardship, that I think then it would have to come to the council for the approval on that one.
Thank you, yes. Okay, we've reached the point where we would love to hear from you. So what you're considering tonight is the first reading of an ordinance that would approve the purchase and sale and the development agreement to Vertical. If approved tonight, we would bring back for second reading on January 23rd. So I just want to open it up for questions or comments if there are any from council.
Councilors have any comments? Councilor Yarbrough.
Thank you, Mayor. Just quick question. I don't know, I'm sure it was on me. I don't recall us agreeing that for the affordable housing that it will be permanent deed restriction. So there are no options for affordable housing for those to kind of waiver out of that situation? I'm sorry, my screen.
That's okay. The affordable fee waiver has been in place for multiple years, and we have existing affordable deed restrictions on for sale units out there, for example, all of Blue Vista. And so there are ways built in. It is a permanent deed restriction, but there are ways built in for owners to get out if needed. The hardship, the financial hardship is built in, and then their resale value is built based on a calculation currently with what they've paid down versus what improvements they might have made. It's kind of a separate track than the attainable and how we build that in.
There is a way for the affordable side to pull equity out. It's just different than the attainable
It's
side.
calculated differently.
And that's just the way the ordinance is drafted on the affordable side. So if council, kind of similar to other conversations, if council wants to adjust that, we're going to need a policy change or an ordinance change. But that's in conformance with the existing policy.
Okay. And HOA fees as well?
So that's built into our maximum sales prices. So if there's HOA fees included, our maximum sales prices build that in because it's backing into what a person can afford based on their income, and the HOA is built into that.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Councilor Christ.
Just to piggyback off of that, is there any idea how much the electrical costs would be since it'll be all electric?
I don't think we're far enough along to be able to come up with numbers that are pretty exact. Any estimates? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. The first 10 years of a mortgage, most of the payments are interest. I mean, you just don't have a whole lot of reduction of principal. So I'm wondering what happens if you're trying to build equity. It really assumes that you're going to hold it longer than 10 years or the sales price is, the market is going to stay steady. But what happens if there's a dip in the market and people end up upside down in their mortgage?
So our maximum sales prices do update every year, and they take into the account the last year to 18 months of data, including median sales prices and what interest rates have been in the last year. So our maximum sales prices are built to move with the market. And so if someone, I should say, it's not an immediate real time because we have to do it on an annual basis. So it's not perfect, but over time it averages out. So we did try and build our sales price spectrum to be flexible within the market and try and match up with it.
Yeah, but of course, once it's purchased, and we're talking 10 years after the purchase, things can happen. Okay, so you don't have any mechanism built in to reclaim the investment, the city investment in the project. And I looked at the numbers. I think with the unearned revenue from the fee waivers was about 4.9, and then another 6 million to mind the gap there. So about 11 million total. And the city would never recover that. Is that correct?
No, unless the project has excess proceeds or other cost savings, in which we do the 75-25 split.
Right, okay. And the only inventory we would retain would be the 55 units.
Retain.
I mean, have deed restriction and retain as affordable.
So the 55 units would be permanently deed restricted as affordable. The 130 or so units would be deed restricted under the attainable housing program, which could be as much as 30 years.
Right, but with continuous ownership would end after 10.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, and then we would have no inventory from those 130.
Right. So the idea is with the rolling deed restrictions, some people, you want to balance wealth generation, because now we're not talking permanent housing security. That's really what the affordable side is for. In attainable, you're looking for people that they need to get in and then use that as a stepping stone to get into the market. So we're trying to balance allowing people to pull out their wealth or stay in and be secure if they want to as well. And with that means the city investment would help some gain wealth and would also roll along and maximize the number of people that we can help.
And I'm just addressing the concept, and it's a policy thought that we have to have more inventory of attainable housing within the city. And had discussions about that. But, okay, so then let's, by the way, you present this type of information very well, Molly.
Oh, thank you.
Um,
You've got
but-
lots of practice by now.
Easy to follow, makes it interesting. It's great. Tell me about the neighborhood. Now, I'm familiar with it, but there's shopping there. But where is the closest school?
I don't know if it's shown on our
Is
map.
Is that your school, Susie? Maybe Indian Peaks? No.
The
Yeah.
closest, well, the closest elementary school is going to be west of, it's going to be the one adjacent to Kanemoto Park.
Burlington.
Burlington.
Okay.
And the middle schools, I think that feeds into Sunset. And this may feed into a couple of elementary schools. And then high school, I think that feeds into Skyline.
Niwot.
No,
Niwot.
Niwot.
Mm.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, Silver Creek, yeah.
Yeah, that's the other piece is that open enrollment's a bit of a different animal in terms of where people end up.
Well,
Okay.
Firestone's also in the district, so,
That's true. It wouldn't necessarily be farther to go east. All right, that's all the questions that I had. Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Molly, I think this is an easy one, but essentially for the attainable housing, we do not have the goal of eliminating the property investor's risk. Is that correct?
Not eliminating. It is a less risky product generally than the affordable ones.
Wait a minute.
What do you mean by property investor? The buyer?
The buyer,
Oh.
the
I
person
see.
who occupies.
Correct. There's a distinct difference in the attainable and the affordable in that what you're doing is you're by reducing the entry point, you're giving people the opportunity to buy a product that doesn't exist in the market, but there's still inherently the same risk that you have that any buyer would have in purchasing a home.
Correct. It's an entry point to market. So the point is not necessarily housing security and reducing that risk as much as possible. It's more, here's
An
a way
opportunity.
in, and now this is
It's up to
what
you.
Yes.
Thank you.
In part of it, in terms of the growth of the houses, and this is a different product that we're learning from, and when we talk about inclusionary housing, it truly is inclusionary minus the market rate. Those are the conditions associated with buying the land at a low price. But it really is intermixing, reducing the wealth in terms of how you see it. If you're curious, the Mueller neighborhood in Austin, Stapleton neighborhood in Denver, kind of those concepts, but a little bit more refined and truly being focused on it. And I felt I was remiss in saying this earlier. That was actually the developer's intent in this, is removing the wealth from the front of the house so that it all looks similar. And it really is to the point of getting into that inclusionary housing piece.
Seeing no one else in the queue with comments, the staff is asking for us to either approve the execution of the purchase and sale and development agreement or do not approve the purchase. So- Well, it will go to second reading with the motion to approve. So Councillor Martin.
Yes, I move to move it forward.
Okay. All right, Councillor Martin moved this, I don't even know what it's called at this point, 2024-07, to move it, and it was seconded by Councillor Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you, staff.
Thank you.
Thank you very
for
much.
all the input.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and I would say I appreciate you all being along with us on this ride. I didn't say this earlier, I did talk about the landowner, but I didn't want to say this until council had a chance to make the decision at this point. This has really been a great partnership with Vertical and really working through and understanding all the details and honestly not refusing to show us anything and being willing to have the hard conversations. And so I just wanted to let you all know, when we say open book, this has been open book. So thank you.
I know it's been a lot of work, but I think the city can be really proud of this development. So thank you. All right, our next one is liquor, marijuana, and other licensing code updates. And our city clerk, Don Quintana, is going to.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Are you ready for a good round of 40 questions, 20 questions? We're here tonight, Don Quintana, City Clerk, here to talk to you about some licensing code updates and get some policy direction from you all in the areas of marijuana licensing, liquor licensing, and then specialty business licensing. We've broken up the presentation differently than the council comm was written, in hopes that if somebody was confused, maybe this would add some clarity. So we'll first talk about marijuana or cannabis, then we'll go into liquor or alcohol, whichever word you prefer, and then we'll talk about specialty business. Before we go there, I wanted to frame our discussion, and if you'd indulge me in an analogy, if we were talking about what we were going to do for spring break and planning our trip for spring break, this policy setting journey that we would be on would be likened to us deciding, are we going to Florida? Are we flying or driving? Are we going to Disney World? Sort of those big pieces of our vacation. We're not booking hotels yet. We're not ready to look at our itinerary. We're looking at the big sort of pillars of our journey, if that makes sense. So we have kept this information fairly high level, not into the weeds. We are not presenting any ordinances for you to look at tonight. We really need some policy direction, and we'll bring back some drafted language for you all. So off we go. Marijuana and cannabis, just wanted to quickly look back over the past 10 years since some members of this council were not on council, may not be aware of where Longmont's been in the past 10 years. In June of 2013, we enacted a prohibition on marijuana business in Longmont city limits. In January 2014, retail sale of marijuana began in the state of Colorado after the passage of Amendment 64. In October of 2017, Longmont City Council finally decided to lift the prohibition, and Ordinance 2017-61 was passed, and it allowed 4 retail marijuana stores in city limits. 4 of those were chosen in July 2018, and in the fall of 2019, our first store opened in Longmont city limits. In 2019 as well, as you all have heard of, House Bill 19-1230 was passed that residents have talked to us about. In October 2020, you gave us direction, and we brought back an ordinance for you to adopt delivery for medical marijuana only. And then last year at the retreat, you identified that you wanted us to bring back information on marijuana hospitality businesses. And so here we are today at long last. In this marijuana code, we have kind of 4 big questions. The doozy of the night is really the first one. Would you like to remove the cap on licenses to add a hospitality license? Secondly, are you interested in us looking at a social equity program? Third, we've identified some burdensome requirements that exist in our current code. We would like to suggest that those be removed, but we need your direction to bring that back. And we have a little definition technicality to clean up. Also need your direction on that. So first, we wanted to talk about the cap on licenses. So our code limits to us to have 4 retail marijuana establishments in city limits. That really is the big question. Are you interested in lifting the cap? In order to allow a hospitality business of any type, we have to lift the cap because we currently have 4 licensed retail stores in Longmont city limits. If you'd like to remove the cap, then we need, what does that look like? Is it lift the cap? Is it a new number? Is it removing the cap entirely? Are there other licenses the council would like to dabble in? It really is quite a loaded question. And so what is a marijuana hospitality business would be, in case you weren't informed of what that is. Marijuana hospitality business allows somebody to open a business where somebody could come to that premises and consume marijuana there. So there are 3 types or 3 models: on-premises consumption and sales. So if you think of that in the alcohol realm, that's where you go to a location, to a restaurant or a bar, you order your item and you consume it there and you don't take it away with you. You're not allowed, in fact, to take it away with you. Same model, only marijuana. The BYOC or BYOW, I don't know which acronym you'd prefer, but on-premises consumption, no sales might be the bring your own model, where it's allowed to be consumed in a venue, but there are no sales there. There are tons of rules within each of these models, so I'm not going into those weeds. And then the mobile premises consumption and sales, and you've seen these. These are those cannabis tours. One of them has a very catchy hashcab name. They're, come right around, we'll tour you the cannabis industry in Colorado, and you can consume in this vehicle as we drive you around. So those are the 3 models of hospitality license. And as we began to look at, so as you may or may not know, the city and county of Denver has set themselves apart in the industry, in the regulated marijuana industry, from the get-go. Really has done a great job of delving into building the bridge as they were going across the river when creating the regulation. So we always look to the city and county of Denver to see what they do first whenever we have questions. And so one of the pieces when we were looking at the information to bring this to you all, city and county in Denver has distance restrictions, liquor code. It's a common regulatory thing with liquor as well. And I wanted to put this map and ask for this map for you all because actually my first question was, if we enacted distance restrictions, is there anything left? I just was curious and I thought you all might want that visual. So what you see on this map, and it's kind of small, my apologies, is the gray area is Longmont city limits. That's our jurisdiction. The blue stars are dispensaries in town. 4 of those are in Longmont city limits. 4 of those are not. So Longmont is decently covered, but they aren't all our stores. So just to be clear, and I can tell you which ones are and aren't if you're interested. The orange bubbles are 1,000-foot buffers around childcare, schools, those kinds of facilities. And then what's left is the green, which is a mixed-use zone where a marijuana hospitality business might be located if it's not a mobile one. And you can see the green there on the screen. There is still substantial locations where a marijuana hospitality business might locate, and we just really wanted to check that out before we asked you a question that was kind of a dead-end question if there was no possible location left. So the other questions we have for you in relation to hospitality is, if you lift the cap again, are you interested in looking at other licenses? There's cultivation licenses, there's research and development, there are various other license types. And how do you want that cap to look? And is there some other direction, some other thing you'd like us to know or look at or bring back that we haven't talked about? Again, this is very high level, but is there something else in your, thought process around marijuana licensing that you'd like us to consider as we bring something back, if you direct us to do so? And on the staff side, we just want to remind that there's always a consideration for the resources involved in managing those licenses in terms of the multiple departments, police, fire, doing those inspections, building inspections, managing of the license, those kind of things, courts to do the hearings and such. So that is the marijuana hospitality piece. I can pause and let you ask questions, or I can keep barreling through because I have all my questions captured at the end. Your preference. 29th question. Keep going?
Thank you, Mayor Peck.
Okay, good. Stop.
Don, myself, I'm not really, could we go back a couple of slides to your list of one more? Keep going, I think. No. Maybe it's before that. The options, so the. Okay, there you go.
This
Sorry,
guy.
7. Yeah, I'm not, very keen on B and C, but I think that maybe there's a appetite in the community for A, not that, and so I'm just wondering if there's an interest to look at that further. And that would probably then mean that we need to look at expanding our current cap from 4 to something like 8 to keep it, in some check to see how it proceeds. I mean, you can't really put the toothpaste back in the bottle after that, but. I think there's a point where I think it's better than having people just on the street. Right now, what people are doing, we know this, we see this, that they're going and just using it as they walk down the street. If we have facilities where they treat it like they would go to a bar and they only consume it there inside the space, then there's a certain amount of being able to for those services to focus on just those areas. And so I think that that's something to at least look at.
Councilor Martin.
Yes, I think that Councilor Member McCoy and I have the same concern, but a little bit to make it a little clearer. On-premise consumption and sales mean that, like in a bar, you can't take it away from you. You have to you have to consume it there. And I believe that both of the people that are in support of hospitality businesses here have that model, right? You would not want to be able to take it away. I think that's probably easier for us to regulate. I may be misstating somebody's intent with that, but if what I would like to do is keep our retail cap and have a separate hospitality cap, because retail, where you go in and you walk out with a bag full of stuff, has a certain ambiance for the city, whereas a hospitality business is different and probably would occur in different neighborhoods. And so I'd like to say that I think we would want to say that it's a separate allocation and not have any not have any overlap with conventional retail. And I tend to think that at least to begin with, we should have on premises consumption, but no exiting with the goods. Because you can already buy infused oils and stuff like that in our existing retail.
If I could just interject one thing I failed to mention, I apologize. The members of the audience, of the public who have mentioned their interest are neither interested in sales, have both indicated that is not the business model they would be interested in. We could delve into that with them at any time if you like, but I just wanted to relay that to you. So they would actually be
question of adding hospitality licenses or any licenses at all, and keep the answers to the questions for a study session.
What's an emotion? Councilor Martin.
I like that idea, and I would like to move that we consider doing exactly that, putting together a new pool of licenses and discussing the regulatory details in a study session.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilor Martin that we keep the detailed discussions at a study session. Do you want to make it a date certain? Or just leave it up to staff on that study session?
There's one February 6th, that already is pretty full, I believe. So it wouldn't be until a March study session would be the next, and I'm not looking, I don't know how full that agenda is at this point. But we could look.
I would say, that's really not very far out. I would say the next available study session in March or April would be fine.
Great, thank you. All right. So that was made and amended by Councilor Martin, excuse me, seconded by Councilor McCoy. Is there any discussion about that? Let's vote, please. That passes unanimously. Thanks for that motion. So do you want to continue then with the presentation?
Absolutely, that was my question. Should I keep going then? Or we, okay. Okay, so the next question is, the state marijuana enforcement division is encouraging municipalities to implement social equity programs. These are intended to create a more inclusive environment in the cannabis industry in the state of Colorado, based on the decades of, the impact of decades of enforcement of marijuana laws prior to the legalization of cannabis in the state of Colorado. So the question is, are you interested in us looking at that? We showed you, again, the city and county of Denver's model, which, is a solid, already well thought out model. Of course, city and county of Denver has a heck of a lot more going on in terms of licenses that we do. I just wanted you to see those numbers. They're doing 144 retail stores, 300 cultivation licenses. They have a lot going on, but nonetheless, our thought is, why recreate the wheel? Would you like us to bring something back that might fit with Longmont, sort of modeled after the city and county of Denver? We do have some specific questions there. Should we follow their criteria? Look at specific license types? Are you interested, really, is the big question. Are you interested in us looking at that, yay or nay? And if not, no problem. And if you are you comfortable with us looking at the model sort of city and county in Denver has used and bringing that back? That's the big question on that guy.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I am interested in bringing this back for, with the answers to these questions as far as what Denver looks like. How's that rolling out? I've had conversations with other community members around the social equity program, and the impact that it could have, a positive impact that it could have in our community. So I would like to bring that back for discussion. If anyone else is interested.
Councillor Martin.
Yeah, I would just, for the information of the council, have also had discussions with constituents who are interested specifically in the social equity program. So I do believe that there is interest in that, and we should discuss it in the study session.
I agree. That's got to be a very strong point when we put this out when we make a policy, because it's going to come back on us. We need to make sure that the social equity. Would you mind going back to the last slide? I didn't quite understand this second bullet point. They acknowledge that equitable cannabis industry that acknowledge the effects of decades. Are we talking about a positive effect?
Negative.
A negative.
Negative historical effect, yes. And I copied that straight from their website. It's not my wording, that's theirs.
So these are reasons to have a social equity program. Okay,
yes, that support having a social equity program, correct.
Thanks. Okay.
Yes. Okay, so
you may go on.
I was gonna say, we could do a thumbs up
Oh, yeah, for the social equity.
to bring back social equity.
Yes. That's unanimous.
Thank you. And comfortable with Denver included is what, okay. The next area of code changes we request your blessing to bring back would be to remove some burdensome requirements in the marijuana code. So our code currently, when someone renews, one of our 4 stores renews their license, they have to refile all the same paperwork they gave us to apply initially, which was a whole lot of paperwork. In fact, one application was a filing box. That was one application when we got those. They're thick. It includes things like a cover letter, a control plan, a business plan, community outreach plan. These are things that we don't need necessarily when considering renewal, or a transfer either. If that business is established, we don't need them to reestablish that they're in the proper zone. We've already established that when they were first opened. So we request your permission to make those, we don't do anything with that paperwork either. So we'd like to reduce the burden on the applicants, remove those things that we don't need. But the thing we would recommend to keep in terms of a transfer is if they were making a substantial change to their business plan or their operations, maybe their odor management plan, then we would want to see that. If it's something impacts our operations, but otherwise, we don't need to necessarily revet all of that again. So we request your permission to bring back those changes.
I have one question on, under renewal, the second bullet point. Do you get background checks and IDs, et cetera, on new employees, or?
We do.
Okay.
Yes, we do, Mayor, but on a renewal, again, they're required to update their employees all the time with the state. The state
Okay.
is, issuing employee badges every day, vetting owners. We'll talk about managers in just a moment, but not with a renewal necessarily, so.
Okay, let's give direction on this, is easy. I'm going to make a motion that we
Bless you, bless you.
direct staff to remove the burdensome requirements for renewals and transfers. So I made that motion. It was seconded by, I heard him first, Councillor McCoy. So is there any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. Can we do a voice vote because we're all on the same? All right, all those in favor? All those opposed?
Thank you very much.
That passes.
Lastly, in terms of the marijuana code, we do want to know who the day-to-day manager is, and we
Yes.
want the licensees to keep us up to date on those. We want to vet those on-site managers. Our code is currently a little confusing, points to a statute that refers to an owner. Owners are, of course, vetted as owners of the application. So we just want to clean that up, and your permission to bring, while we're cracking that code open, are you comfortable with us fixing that? That's our last question in terms of marijuana. So a yay or a nay a thumbs up would be sufficient. Thank you very much.
Do you need a motion for that, though?
I think the thumbs up is sufficient. Yeah.
Okay.
On to
I
liquor.
got the legal head shake. It was a nod. Well, you shook it this way.
So under liquor, we have a question about fingerprint retention. And we want to be consistent with current CBI rules and regs, and then about festival permits. So first, the fingerprint, we used to get fingerprint cards. Fingerprints used to be handled differently in the state. The police department used to do the fingerprinting. Now they don't do that anymore. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation has a third-party vendor, a couple of them, and they handle all fingerprints, and they're done electronically. So our code is just a little outdated. We don't actually get fingerprints anymore, and in fact, we don't want to keep those anyway.
You know, when this comes back on second reading, then we'll have public hearing. Okay, thank you.
And along those lines, we just don't want to have to retain those to protect them, is exactly the point. So we'd recommend that we strike those references to be current with what we're actually doing, which is not retaining fingerprints, not keeping background results in our files.
So thumbs up if you want to agree to remove fingerprint retention. Thumbs down if it's a no. So that's good. We're all good.
Thank you very much. The next one is a little bit different deal. This is the festival permit. These were enacted in 2023 by the state legislature. Festival permits are kind of what they sound like, a festival. For a festival, we all kind of know what a festival is. What's different about these is they can last up to 72 hours or a maximum of 72 hours. And licensees, currently businesses licensed, those on the right-hand side of the slide, can all request a permit for up to 9 festivals for up to 72 hours each. And they can each participate into up to 52 festivals each year. Currently, if one of our licensees applied for a festival permit, they apply to the state. We get a copy of that and we have a chance to weigh in, but our authority is not vetting it. Our authority is not the decision maker on that. Exactly, we make a recommendation to the state. What would be preferred is, because it is a matter of local control, that they actually, we opt in, that we create a festival permit, they apply to the state and to the city, just like most things, liquor and marijuana, under the dual authority of the city and the state. So these are have not taken off yet, but we can't imagine why not in our office. We are waiting for this to hit. So we just did a little math. If our 114 eligible licensees pulled 9 permits each, that'd be 1,000 plus festivals in Longmont. That's not going to happen, honestly, realistically, but these are currently being used if you go to the Boulder County Farmers Market. Some of our distilleries are selling their wares, their products at the farmers market via a festival permit. So these are happening already in our vicinity. That's not our jurisdiction, right? But we think that 2020, the time is not long before we start seeing many more of these. It seems like a very functional tool. So in order to provide better local control, we'd recommend opting in, but need your blessing to draft that language and bring that back.
Personally, I would say, for me, this needs more discussion, and I would like to do it at the study session. But I need more input if anyone agrees with it. Does not. Councilor Rodriguez.
Let's just say we don't opt in. Would that be a way to circumvent having to get a special event license from the liquor authority?
A special event permit is a
Permit.
different vehicle, these licensees wouldn't qualify to pull a special event permit. They're mostly a fundraising tool for nonprofit organizations. So a festival permit is targeting different licensees, is a different mechanism to get alcohol to an event.
So it's not a way to circumvent that process, though?
Just different mechanisms,
Okay,
right?
that's all I need to know.
Right,
Thanks.
and the special event permit, we have opted in and we solely control. In fact, they were similarly, now we handle all of our own special event permits, the local authority blesses all of those, so we just don't have the opportunity to bless these. I mean, we are copied on them,
So
but
do you want to give direction tonight or more study at the study? Okay. Whatever council wants to do is what I want to know. So, opt in now? Okay, all those that want to opt in, thumbs up. Okay, those who want to wait, thumbs down. No.
thank you very much. Last area is specialty business licensing. This is a unique little license in the Longmont Municipal Code under Chapter 665. These are sexually oriented businesses. Again, like liquor, we have some outdated language around fingerprints and background checks. Buying information needs to be well protected, and if we don't need it, we'd rather not have to hold on to that. And finally, in this area, we don't have statutory authority. When the state moved to a third-party vendor for fingerprinting, we don't have authority under our licensing requirement to background check the employees and the owners of these businesses. So the way to fix that, if we're in here fixing the section of code, is to require them to bring us and disclose to us their background. So you can go to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, any of us can, pay $6 or $8.95, maybe it is now, a nominal fee, and print your full Colorado Bureau of Investigation background report. We would like to require them to bring that to us when they file their application, because we don't have the authority to send them out to get fingerprinted. So some changes there, that where this section of code is the most outdated, and we needed to get caught up in terms of how fingerprints are handled.
I have a question. Do you know the vendors that you accept background checks from?
The state has contracts, and so we are obligated to use them. One is Identigo, and the other, I can't recall. Do you know, Chris? Do you remember? Colorado what? Oh, Colorado fingerprinting.
So my question then for council is it important that they use the recommended background checks? I mean, I don't know much about it, but what if they bring in a...
They could only get it from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation.
Okay.
There's a single source, so you would have to go to the CBI website
Okay.
and enter the data, pay the fee, and it'll give you the printout of your background check, and then we would have that when they file their application.
Okay.
There's not many people in that business, just the Colorado Bureau of Investigation.
So do we want the staff to update this code? Yes. All right. You got it.
I think we're good. I added this slide in case we needed to run back through, but I think we're good. Thank you very much. Anything else you'd like
Thank
us to
you.
know? We're good. Thank you very much, Mayor Council.
We have one more. It's the advisory board appointment for the Senior Citizens Advisory Board. We did have someone who did not, who vacated, is that correct?
The resignation, Mayor and Council, was not forwarded to the clerk's office.
Oh, okay.
And so at the time that we brought appointments to you all at the last meeting in 2023, we weren't aware of it. Since you have a slate of candidates and it's very recent, we wanted to just bring that back in case you wanted to just appoint and go ahead and fill that vacancy.
And you did say that this one person the board recommended that was not appointed in the
Correct.
first round, and that was David Brenna?
That was David Brenna, correct. He was recommended by the board, yes, absolutely. But we didn't have a vacancy to
fill.
To fill, Right, yes.
Counselor Martin.
Yeah, as the liaison to the Senior Citizens Advisory Board, I move that we seat David Brenna.
Okay. So Counselor Martin moved that we seat David Brenna to SCAB, and that was seconded by Counselor McCoy. I love that. Yeah, to SCAB. Are there any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. And that passes unanimously. We're now at final call, public invited to be heard. This would be your time if you want to make a comment. I kind of spread out, don't I?
The reason that I came to Longmont was actually because I was fleeing from my boyfriend who was stealing my identity. He brought a woman's clothes into my house. He was stole my youngest child's affidavits of paternity, 2 of them. He wouldn't need it because I would give it to him. He stole pictures out of my house. I thought that he stole my pay stubs. They deleted from 2017 all the way down to 2013 from my email. So they have access to this. They have permissions behind it. They can get into it anytime they want. And it's 20 years of email. It goes back so far. It has 2 different types of fingerprints on it from 2018 and 2013 from when I had more professional jobs. And so they are able to order those with my birth certificate, with my social security number that they are able to already obtain. And that those don't have to be attached to anything. They can just order it. And order my fingerprints for adopting out my children perhaps in a different state, for possibly making 3D fingerprint gloves and putting my fingerprints onto, onto criminal things since he's associated with gangs. And so many different things have gone through my head. Who knows? Just like legal cases, who knows? But the fact of the matter is that it can be used. The creativity that they're getting, the permissions that they're using, they have permissions to my Google. I know that they do because they can make things disappear. And it sounds like it's psychosis, and it isn't, because the laws have not caught up with the technology. And so because the laws haven't caught up with the technology, the processes have not caught up with that technology, and therefore they cannot be invalidated until all of those are put in place. If we had a process to be able to do that and go through identity theft, all the different forms, then we would be able to establish that was or wasn't happening. In this case, I think that it is, because there's so many different forms that it's taking. They took all of my pictures. They changed the email address that it was associated with Microsoft. They downloaded to theirs. They re-uploaded them to mine and downloaded them for months before they finally kind of came to whatever it was. I guess they stole all my pictures. I have no idea what they're doing with them, but they can put themselves in it. They can change evidence, is basically what my contention is. And so my fear is that that's affecting my case with my children right now, because I am actually, but the fact of the matter is that technology hasn't caught up with it, and we need to put parameters in place before things happen. So with specifically dealing with the fingerprints, you have to have something physical to back that up. If somebody doesn't go in and fingerprint as you, then you shouldn't be able to order them. They're able to order my fingerprints just by submitting my documents, by submitting my social security card, by submitting my birth certificate, which they already have access to. So there's nothing tangible to say, there's nothing tangible there to be able to stop that. It's just, well, we have your records, we have your medical records, we have your records from school, we have, all these things that we can order because we have these other documents. So because we have these other ones, we can get these. And so then that leads, of course, to the fact that, they have access to everything, that they can get my fingerprints. And so fingerprints are a really big deal because they're part of you. They aren't something that's separate. And granted, they could probably get it off of the bottles. Oh.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
And we are now at mayor and council comments. Oh, Lance, I'm sorry. I was looking down instead of up.
That's all right, Mayor. Mayor and council, as the proposal that was set before you today, I know there was some concern about BYOB. That and the dispensaries. A is for the dispensaries. Now, a lot of people buy a lot of quantity at a dispensary. And that's where, the other business that might be able to consume marijuana. I would not recommend that be taken because people do spend a lot of money in these dispensaries. A BYOB would limit the quantity that you bring into the establishment, so a person may only bring in a small amount that they're willing to consume and then leave without anything in their pocket. So that is, something to be considered. I know you guys are real concerned about, people walking around streets with cannabis in their pocket or in their vaporizer or stuff like that. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to start this business, is to get those people off the streets and to give them a place where they can be social and where cannabis can be consumed not as a stereotype, but more as a social drug that it is. Because if you use it as a social drug, it becomes a social issue where people are more likely to get along. We see this in concerts, we see this in other clubs. But if you just allow the dispensaries to allow it, then you're going to see more people walking around with cannabis in their pockets, and you're not going to be able to consume 2 ounces of cannabis in a dispensary unless you stay there for a couple weeks. So I would really advise against the dispensaries getting these licenses rather than, individual businesses and practices where, people can just come and relax and be part of Longmont. So, and that's really where I'd like to go with this.
Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
Now we're at council comments. Do any councilors have comments? No. All right, city manager remarks.
Got another 15-minute presentation for you. No comments, Mayor Council.
I vote no to extend. City attorney,
No comments, Mayor.
thank you. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.